Uh-oh. Whoops. There we go. Hi. How doing, Takuya? Oh. Yeah. So Takuya, last night was pretty crazy. I got home from work. Was like, I'll do a little stream. I saw a couple people, family-friendly people playing, so I was like, I'll play some Warzone. So I played Warzone. And then I decided to stream. I was like, I'll stream this. Why not? And I got a raid of 48 people from Aki, or a host. Yeah. I mean, it was only 11 o'clock here when I started. But, yeah, Aki was getting off. I didn't even think about it. And he hosted me with 48 people. I was like, all right. And then we won 2 Warzone games. So, it's the first time in a long time I've won 2 in a row, let alone 2 in a single night. But, yeah, it was good. A lot of people, yeah, it was like 2 a.m. for a lot of people when I got off. But that was fun. It was very fun. Yeah, how you doing, Takuya? You chilling? How's your Saturday? Willow, come here now. Come here. Willow, come here now. You don't get to be upstairs. Not after this stuff. Couldn't do it. Sorry. Willow's being a punk. Chores, cleaning, nice. I did a lot of cleaning this week. I cleaned the downstairs really well. I bought a new vacuum, so that kind of motivated me. Because I had an old one that the brush started, an old Dyson. I mean, this is probably 10 years old, this Dyson. Maybe 8 years old. And the brush started going pop, 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 and like hitting the ground because it was off. And some of the plastic like had melted or I don't know what happened. So I've gone like 3 weeks without vacuuming. And I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. No, more like 2 weeks. And so I went and bought a new Shark vacuum, and it way better than even the vacuum I had, even than the Dyson. Even though it's old, but it picked up all of Willow that was on the ground, all of her hair. And then I was like, you know what? Let's clean everything. So I cleaned. I literally did every last bit of laundry I have, so now everything's clean and hung up instead of like. I tend to like. There's so many memes online about this. Do my laundry and then keep it in the basket like for a week or 2. Adulting, yay, exactly. Excitement of buying back, yeah, totally. It's the little things in life now. But there is a good feeling about just cleaning. I don't know. I think anybody could get into that. Willow, stop. Thank you. Here, let me move this so you can lay down if you want. Is it okay? You can come lay down. Good girl. Yeah, exactly. Well, it sucks because you procrastinate and then you're like, I don't want to put it up right now. And then it gets harder because then it gets all wrinkled again. And then you got to maybe like wet a piece of clothing and throw it in with everything else inside the dryer so you can get all the wrinkles out. Then you can put it up. It makes it so much harder. But I found that the middle ground is to put up all the shirts that would get wrinkled and then leave all my socks in there and not care until I need to use them. That one's not as bad. Okay, we'll do a little changing over. That needs to be a little bigger, doesn't it? There we go. Well, today's my day off. I was going to work a double tomorrow. Somebody offered to take my night shift, which is good. I need rest now. I don't need the money as much as I need rest and reflection. I'll know Tuesday, or maybe probably Wednesday, I'll know if I have a shot at getting this job, this ministry job. I've already been through 2 rounds of interviews, and now they're presenting the last 2 or 3 candidates. And I'm part of it, so we'll see. If not, either way, I need to start doing this. Chosen People Ministries. I probably showed you them before, and we've talked about it. Proclaim the Jewish Messiah to God's chosen people. Mitch Glazer, good guy. Let's read this. I'm actually curious. So this is what I would go probably do ministry with them. I'd probably start fundraising full time for them, and working part time at the job I'm doing now. But that's what it would look like. It would look like me just talking about what I usually talk about on stream, but also trying to get people to fundraise for this ministry as a part of my kind of fundraising. You gotta raise a decent amount of money when you're a full-time missionary for anybody. Mordecus! Button man. I don't know why my alerts are not going off. And I don't know what is going on here. Hold on. Latest followers. We're going to make that go away. Thank you, Mordecus, for the subscription. 14 months, man. Just keep it coming, brother. I know, Mordecus, I missed you. Yeah, what have you been up to, bro? I haven't seen you as much in the last couple weeks. There it is. Okay. Thank you. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's the G-Funk era, funked out with a gangster twist. Hope your weekend's going well, Mordecus. What is there of it? And tell me about how everything's looking with job projects and all that stuff. Just coming from a week of mountains. Oh my gosh, that is beautiful. That's awesome. Was this after? And tell me the lineup of it, because last I checked, your wife was making you some of the really delicious looking dishes. Was that in the mountains, or was that before you went to the mountains? Because I didn't know, because I just want to know, because if it's like, oh, she was just being awesome and really, so I decided, hey, let's take you to the mountains, baby. Like, what was the lineup of all that? Was everything planned, or was it spontaneous? Okay, that was at the timeshare. Heard that. Timeshares can work if you have the right people to go in with. It's a good middle ground between owning something and actually just renting, because it's kind of neither. Because you don't have the obligation to do it all the time. So this is your month then? What months do you get at the timeshare? Because I know you have to split it up with other people. You have to share the time. I would never buy into a timeshare at this point in time. Oh, totally. So then, want to buy a timeshare? That's great, Losty. That was great timing. I hear you, Mordecus. I hear you. I mean, you're not interested at this time, but what can we do to change your mind? But my in-laws bought it like oh, nice. Yeah, back when it was like hot off the presses, man. Hot off the press. I used to work for this company called Vacation Tour and Travel in Denton, Texas. since we haven't. We're still chatting. Denton, Texas, for college. It was like a call center, okay? And we had packages that we could sell anywhere in the U.S., any like major spots. So we had like Williamsburg, old town or old school, classic, Colonial Williamsburg. That's it, Colonial Williamsburg. Closer to you, we had the Smoky Mountain Retreat. We had Dollywood in Missouri. We had, God, what else was there? I forget. Oh, the Wisconsin Dells. That looked awesome. So all this stuff looked awesome. But you would get these amazing deals. And we ended up doing cruise lines too, eventually. But you get these awesome deals, and it was only so that you could go here a 2 hour, 3 hour, 6 hour, however long they tried to keep you pitch for timeshares at that place. And you had to basically go, yeah, I guess I could do that for a day while we're having a cheap vacation. But I would sell those packages and get paid to sell them and get commission and stuff. It was not a fun job. It was a lot of pressure. But I'm good at talking to people, so it worked. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and read this because this is what Chosen People Ministries, this is what the president, Mitch Glazer, awesome guy. He was in Jerusalem, staying at the Chosen People house that we were based in when I was there in Israel. He even gave me an opportunity to possibly come on board with them to do full-time mission work or come learn at the Joseph Feinberg School of Messianic Judaism in New York City. So I decided I wanted to go look for church jobs. I've never really gotten back to them about it. He said, when's a good time? Who knows? Who knows? Who does know? God. So now it actually sounds a little bit more like something that I might do because all these doors have been shut for other ministries. So I'm going to read it. One of the challenges that Jewish people have faced over the centuries, hold on, and they literally own a week at a pretty nice place in the mountains that we have to pay a couple $100 a year. Oh, that's not bad. Nice 2-bedroom condo with large jacuzzi full. Oh my God. Yeah, that sounds awesome. Oh my gosh. But $200 for a week, that's a great deal. Especially nowadays. One of the challenges that the Jewish people have faced over the centuries is how to preserve our heritage while looking to the future. This may also sum up the goal of Chosen People Ministries. Although when compared to Jewish history, our more than 125-year-old existence seems a mere drop in the bucket of eternity. We must also look ahead, even as we are responsible stewards of our traditions. Fortunately, God has blessed us with a dedicated board, a staff of seasoned servants of Messiah, and a contingent of young people who add tremendous vitality and vision through which the entire mission is energized. It seems that the Lord's honoring our commitment because our work has expanded at a rapid pace. We are finding that Jewish people across the globe are becoming more and more receptive to the gospel as the Lord opens their hearts and minds to the life-giving message of Jesus the Messiah. Our present growth is built upon the strong foundation established by Chosen People Ministries. In 1892, Rabbi Leopold Cohen, a recent immigrant to New York City from Hungary, was walking on the Lower East Side of Manhattan among thousands of new Jewish immigrants when he heard a Jewish preacher proclaiming the gospel in a Yiddish language. Rabbi Cohen stopped to speak with this man and eventually gave his heart to the Messiah. After receiving this theological training and leading his wife, Rose, to the Lord, Rabbi Cohen established the Brownsville mission to the Jews. From these humble beginnings, Chosen People now serves the Jewish people all over the world. I'm grateful for our heritage, yet I'm also able to rejoice that in many ways, Chosen People Ministries is now more vital than ever. We've changed some of our means of communication. I like to joke that Rabbi Cohen probably didn't have an effective website, as effective a website as we do today. But in the midst of the change, and utilizing modern technology, we continue to hold fast to the rabbi's vision of evangelizing and discipling Jewish people worldwide. Our core doctrinal position has not changed in more than a century. We believe with all our... Oh, Willow. I will stop you. Stop. Hey, sit. Sit. Thank you. I know. It's a fluffy dog. Hey. I understand. down. Come here. Sit. Lay down. Lay down. Thank you. She must be. Who will protect this house? Willow. Stop. It's a tiny little fluffy dog. One of the cutest dogs, and Willow's like, dude, it's gotta come in. I gotta stop it. And now she thinks she won. She's like, I'm warning them and they're not coming in, so it's effective, Daddy. Please stop. You're gonna be blinded every time. I'm just gonna put it in front of your face. Okay. Our core doctrinal position has not changed in more than a century. We believe with all of our hearts that the Bible is the inspired word of God and that Jesus is the promised Messiah to Israel. Of Israel, not to Israel, of Israel to everybody, right? And that the simple message of his death and resurrection has the power to transform the lives of Jews and Gentiles. Our international headquarters is located in the heart of New York City. This also happens to be within a half mile of the United Nations and the headquarters of dozens of worldwide Jewish organizations. This is the most fitting because it's our most fervent prayer to God, as it was for Paul's, that Israel might be saved and fully realize its calling to be a light unto the nations. We have a great heritage and a bright future because God is faithful. With your prayers and partnership, we hope to keep proclaiming the gospel until we see him face to face for Zion's sake. Mitch. His testimony is pretty good. It was a great week. Very grateful for the time to disconnect and not think about anything but my wife. Yes, exactly. That's great. Gave us time to just relax and talk through a few things. Good. Sadly, it seemed to have gotten the sinus infection. Sinus infection, head cold when we were up there, and I brought it back. Lost these on the timing, bro. Want to buy another week? Sure you don't want to get on this deal? It's only lasting for another, limited time offer. Mordecus, was that so it was a head cold, or was it, because I know allergies are getting crazy right now. It's only going to get worse with climate change kind of changing how a lot of these plants and stuff thrive at certain times of the year, and it's like doubly and triply, doubly and triple the amount of allergens in the air than usual. So I'm not entirely sure. I'm curious if that might have been it. There's just so much nowadays that there's so much more than COVID to worry about. Okay, so let's do a little. Let's do some Shema. While we start the day. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavcha uvechol nafshecha uvechol meodecha. You listen, Israel, you listen here. The Lord is our God, the Lord is one. You shall, you must, you're commanded to love the Lord your God with all of your mind or heart, your whole being or your soul, and all your strength. Hallelujah. I think it was allergies that caused me some issues that led to the... Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Where was it again? Up. You said up in the mountains, but where? In the Appalachians, but like in North Carolina mountains. Then I take it. Okay. Faith checkbook. What you got for us, Charles Spurgeon? Deuteronomy. I'm not going to do all this. Not of the cursed thing of thine hand. I'm going to read this. You must not take for yourself anything that has been placed under judgment. Then the Lord will relent from his intense anger. Show you compassion, have mercy on you, and multiply you as you promised your ancestors. Okay, what is this? Oh man, yeah, this is when we're talking about the conquest of the Holy Land. Some evil people have departed from among you to entice inhabitants of their cities, saying, "Let's go and serve other gods whom you have not known before." You must investigate thoroughly and inquire carefully. If it is indeed true that such a disgraceful thing is being done among you, you must by all means slaughter the inhabitants of that city with the sword, annihilate with the sword everyone in it, as well as the livestock. You must gather all the plunder into the middle of the plaza and burn the city and all its plunder as a whole burnt offering to the Lord your God. It will be abandoned and ruined forever. It must never be rebuilt again. You must not take for yourself anything that's been placed under judgment. Then the Lord will relent from his intense anger, show you compassion, have mercy on you, and multiply you as he promised your ancestors. Thus, you must obey the Lord your God, keep all his commandments that I'm giving you today, doing what is right before him. This has a lot of intense, historical ideas. This idea, annihilate the sword, everyone in it, as well as the livestock, is pretty sure it's more of Hebrew scholars talk about it as it's almost like a narrative equation in ancient Near Eastern epics and stories and history, the way that they wrote letters. It's this, because you'll see that a lot of the people, pretty much everybody that God says to wipe out in this way, are never wiped out like that. It sounds like it sounds like an excuse, but essentially it's almost like a verbal equation to say they were victorious, as opposed to saying they just wiped out an entire people group. Like that's not the same thing. Many scholars think. Some scholars don't, though. I don't know if this is a harem verse, because harem is what we call some of those verses. What's up, Danos? Danaos? Hey, hey, hey. Welcome in. Hey, Josh. Thanks for coming in. Mike Crackly. Crack, crack. You have your mic muted. Those are my big ones. Better, 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 better. Thank you, Danos. Danaos. We're gonna get even more interesting. Even more interesting. Dang it! What is happening? Maybe that's the maybe. Danaos, I am a follower of Yeshua Hamashiach. I am a Christian. My computer might be being crazy right now, is what it seems like. Um. Yeah. Yep, that's normal. Oh, predictable. I don't know why it's doing that with the. Usually it'll turn right back on. It happened earlier. not cool, man. Well, we're going to have to wait. Thank you, Josh. Danaos. Yeah, the Jewish roots of Christianity, just like she's saying. I don't really need them. Camera, but it'd be nice. It'd be real nice. Video capture. I could always use this random camera that's not nearly as good. I will if I have to. Okay, fine. Fine. At least I have this option. Not bad. It looks more like I'm actually talking to chat because this is my streaming computer. Crackles! Oh my gosh, what is happening to the world right now? Oh my jeez. I can't believe it. I know. What is happening right now? I know, I just need to buy a new cable. Yay! Okay, let's do it like this then, since everything is in decent order. Yeah. God's just not letting me have the choice. BLB? Blue Letter Bible? Yes. Not Nick Cage. Welcome back again, by the way. You followed the other day. Thank you. But yeah, Blue Letter Bible is my favorite as well. So, Danaos, this is the book. You see it on stream as well. It's the Jewish roots of Acts. You can actually probably see my whole setup. I have this little book holder that I've been using. Right now we are in chapter 6. Sorry, chapter 7, verse 2 through 4. We're in Stephen. Oh, no, not Nick Cage. They got great everything. I mean, you can look up everything here. I can even look at the Septuagint. It even has good parsing of verbs as well. So let me do this. Don't they have it? Is it in the forward inline? Yeah, exactly. See? Hifil, infinitive, absolute, etc., etc. It'll go through all these as well if you need it to. Yeah, I love it. It's great. So, Acts 7. Yeah, the roots. That's the thing. Greek, it's a little more specific. Hebrew's a little more sliding scale. Okay, so we already read this part of 7:1. Now we're in 2 and 3. 2 through 4. Now, this is after Stephen is brought in front of the Sanhedrin. And face is glowing, or like an angel is what it says. But it's basically kind of the author's way of saying that he was like Moses, like he was close to God. So, we'll go and read. And he said, "Hear me, brothers and fathers." One Greek word is a sentence to explain in English. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, the use of the Greek words. What I've learned, though, Nick, not Nick, is that even if we have a specific meaning in the Greek, if it's not put in the cultural context of a Hebraic thought of the first century, or just period, then yeah. Oh, there we go. Danos. Exes decoy. Decoy. Dikio. There we go. Wow. I gotta get my Greek down. I'm about to say Danaos sounded very Greek. Yeah, I am Greek. Is that what you're saying? You're right. Okay. Nice. Well, right now we are in the New Testament, so we'll probably come around some Greek words if we need to, but this will bring up the context of the Hebrew. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Danaos. There's my Texas. If I just read it as a Texan, are you Danaos? Anyway, and he said, "Hear, my brethren and fathers, the glory of God appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he lived in Haran, and said to him, Depart from your country and your relatives, and come into the land that I will show you. Then he departed from the land of the Chaldeans and settled in Haran. And from there, after his father died, God removed him into the country in which you are now living." Yeah, the os, right, is actually pronounced, yeah, you actually have the accent over the o, yeah. Perfetto. Stephen addresses the Sanhedrin as brothers and fathers. Andres Adelphoi Kai Pateres. That's the Greek. Usually I won't read the Greek. I just wanted to do it for fun. And does Paul after him, as does Paul after him, albeit in a slightly different account in 22 verse 1. The designation constitutes a mark of respect for the leaders of the nation, the patriarchs being called the fathers of the people. While the command, "Hear me," accusate, represents an entreaty to pay attention, to pay heed to the defense, it also recalls the Shema. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." Deuteronomy 6:4, we did that earlier. The declaration with which the people of Israel take upon themselves the yoke of the kingdom. Right from the beginning of his speech, Stephen therefore identifies himself with the people, their forefathers, and the Torah. Stephen opens his defense with God's appearance as the God of glory. While God's glory is associated with creation, it is particularly linked both with the giving of the Torah and God's presence, first in the cloud and then in the tabernacle and temple, Stephen's dual themes. When Moses descended with the Torah from Mount Sinai, he covered his face with a veil so as not to blind the people with the brightness of his face. The shining is described by the root karan, the noun karen being used for the horn of David's kingdom. "I have found David my servant. In my name his horn shall be exalted. My covenant shall be confirmed to him. So I will establish his descendants forever, and his throne is the days of heaven." That's Psalms 132:17 and 89:20, 24, 28 through 29, etc. Orthodox Christian, but I find all humanitarian religions interesting and worthy. I look up for the author of this book and the faith he represents. It's something between Judaism and Christianity. Sort of. I mean, he is Christian, but he's a Messianic Jew. The fact that Christianity comes from Judaism and now we know more about first century Judaism than we ever have, even more than the early church fathers, sorry to say, because they were culturally separated from much of the things going on. They didn't know much about the Essenes. They didn't write about the Dead Sea Scrolls. They didn't write about all the different Jewish thoughts and teachings. They were literally like calling Jews the synagogue of Satan within a few hundred years. So I like to point out that the context of Jewish thought in the first century shows us that Christianity was not some outsider, different interpretation, rebellious, differentiating, however you want to talk about it, belief. There were plenty of Jewish thought at the time that lines up completely with all the New Testament. That God would come in the form of a man, that God would die for our sins, that the suffering servant would come, that the Gentiles would be brought into the inheritance of Israel. We're going to get through a lot of that in Acts, because that's what Acts is about. But knowing the context really helps. Knowing who God-fearers are, who proselytes are, what the conversion was to convert to Judaism. And once they knew, the believers in Christ said, okay, well, what do we do now? They're like, well, we got to do the same conversion stuff. And the Holy Spirit was like, no, you don't have to do everything the same. So he changed some stuff. God is always above and beyond us, but it's more of an expression of Christianity with the traditional expressions of Judaism still present. Because that was going on in Acts. The Jews didn't just give up their Jewishness. They weren't like, okay, we're just going to have no identities. Paul still even gave Thanksgiving sacrifices. That's different than sin sacrifices. But he went to the festivals, and Paul, followed the Torah till the day he died, and all these different things we see in Acts. So that's the best way for me to say it. It's not between Christianity. I guess that's a decent way to say it, between Judaism and Christianity. But it's Christianity affirming the Jewish Messiah, or Judaism affirming Jesus as the Messiah. It kind of fits in there. The shining is described from Quran. Yep. There's another word for horn, which always is messianic. The word also appears in the prayer for the Messianic king and the Amidah, or 18 benedictions. That's very Jewish. That's even back to the first century again. Where the glory is specifically identified as the horn of salvation. 2 Samuel 22:3, Psalm 18:3, and may in fact have originally referred to Jesus. Okay? This is in the Amidah. Speedily cause the offspring of David, thy servant, to flourish, and lift up his glory by thine divine help, because we wait for thy salvation all day. Blessed are you, O Lord, who causes the strength of salvation to flourish. You know what's funny about that? Every time I read salvation in any kind of Jewish prayer or any kind of Old Testament, the word for salvation in Hebrew is Yeshua, which is Jesus' name. So, blessed are you, O Lord, who causes the strength of Yeshua to flourish. Strength of Jesus, the strength of salvation to flourish. He does. Hallelujah. Abraham is willing to accept the yoke of the kingdom by being faithful to God's commandments. Quote, by faith Abraham, when he was called, obeyed by going out to the place where he was to receive for an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. That's Hebrews 11:8. According to the biblical account, Abraham came from Ur to Haran in northern Mesopotamia. And it was from there that God commanded him to go and land to the land of Canaan. Danaos, thanks for the follow. Welcome to G-Funk Railroad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the fam. I mostly do this, and then I do variety streaming of games, depending. Mostly first-person shooters, open world games, some sports games. Depends on what's hitting my fancy. I've been playing that Vampire Survivor game on and off stream too because of Mordecus. Choo-choo. Welcome in. According to the biblical account, Abraham, came from Ur to Haran in northern Mesopotamia, and it was from there that God commanded him to go to the land of Canaan. While it is possible that Stephen possesses a tradition according to which Abraham lived somewhere else than Mesopotamia before Haran, he also places Abraham's departure from Chaldea after his arrival to Haran and makes no mention of a stopping place between the two. Strictly speaking, Ur of the Chaldeans did not lie within Mesopotamia. While the biblical tradition makes no firm distinction between Abraham's call in Ur and Haran, Stephen evidently identifies Mesopotamia with the land of the Chaldeans. Haran lays in the northwest of the caravan trade routes and was a flourishing center in the 19th and 18th century BCE. The city also plays a significant role in Samaritan history. This is what we were talking about earlier on this last stream. They bring up Stephen, and they talk about how they're debating whether Stephen had Essene roots. He might have been a Samaritan. We don't know. Some of this stuff like the Samaritan Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses that the Samaritans read, which are different. Mount Gerizim, which was their holy mountain, not Mount Zion in Jerusalem. It was in Samaria. These are the conflicts going on. If you watch Chosen, you'll understand that they have a lot about that with the Samaritans. It's very accurate. But what they're trying to talk about here is how maybe Stephen had an understanding from a Samaritan point of view. He might have been a Samaritan who converted. We don't know. The city was also plays a significant role in Samaritan history, where it is said to be the location of an ordeal by fire which proved the sanctity of Mount Gerizim and the Samaritan Pentateuch. See? Although the Masoretic texts share that Terach died in Haran at age 205, thus surviving Abraham's departure by 60 years, Stephen's report that Abraham left after his father's death accords with the Samaritan text, according to which Terach, that's Abraham's father, lived for 145 years. The expression, "this country in which you are now living," may suggest that Stephen is not a native Judean, although it is more likely that he wishes to establish, as Peter before him, that his audience are Abraham's descendants. It is clear the land which occupies the primary point in verse 2 through 8 and precedes the discussion of circumcision. There we go. It is clearly the land which occupies the primary point. Yeah, the land is the main point he's making, and the idea of circumcision. Just like Paul talks about. Abraham was circumcised before the Torah was given on Mount Sinai. These were things of faith. They weren't things of works. That's the whole point there. Is it still doing this? Whatever. I guess, that's what happens sometimes. That's what happens. Big cup of tea. Verses 5 through 7. Again, this is Stephen kind of like recaps Jewish history in chapter 7. Specific kinds, and we'll figure out why. And he gave them no inheritance in it, not even a foot of ground. And yet, even when he had no child, he promised that he would give him as a possession and to his offspring after him. But God spoke to this effect, that his offspring would be aliens in a foreign land, that they would be enslaved and mistreated for 400 years, and whatever nation to which they shall be in bondage, I myself will judge, said God. And after that, they will come out and serve me in this place. God's promise was to give the land as an everlasting possession to Abraham and his descendants. Although Abraham himself was careful to possess the land legally by buying a burial plot of the Machpelah outside Hebron from Ephron rather than receiving it as a gift. Stephen highlights the fact that God made his promise to Abraham, not only before he entered the land, but also before he had a son and thus descendants to inherit it. Abraham's inheritance would be further hindered by the fact that his descendants would be enslaved in a foreign land, one not promised to them. which kept them from entering Canaan for 400 years. As in Hebrews, with which Stephen's speech demonstrates other affinities, Stephen lays great emphasis upon the theme of the people's temporary sojourning on the earth, just like Hebrews 11:8. The phrase, worship me in this place, combines God's appearance to Abraham with his appearance to Moses. Rather than saying that the people would come out with many possessions, Stephen associates the Exodus with the giving of the Torah and God's proclamation to Moses, that the people would worship God at this mountain. The further alteration of mountain to place recalls the description of the future temple in Deuteronomy, in place where the Lord God chooses to establish his name, Deuteronomy 12:21. Stephen's speech demonstrates a clear tendency towards the telescoping. That's a way of kind of like foreshadowing almost, telescoping of discrete quotations and events. Stephen's allusion to service in connection with Abraham's residence. Stephen's allusion to service. I gotta change the angle of this. There we go. Stephen's allusion to service in connection with Abraham's resonates with the verse of the Magnificat. That's what Mary says in the beginning of the Gospels. Quote, the oath which he swore to Abraham our fathers to give us, that we, being delivered from the hands of our enemies, might serve him without fear, in holiness and righteousness before him all our days. Luke 1:73-75. This hymn appears to have originated in circles close to John the Baptist and the Essenes, that's the Qumran community, and reflects the twin themes of national liberation and radical social motifs together with the appeal to God to preserve his covenant through his mercies. The former ideas appear in Genesis 15:14, where God promises that whatever nation to which they shall be in bondage, I myself will judge. The radical social motifs. He has brought down rulers from their thrones, and he has exalted those who were humble. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent away the rich empty-handed. May fit Stephen's role as a deacon appointed to ensure equal distribution of food within the early community. Interesting. Several other passages in Stephen's speech reflect ideas characteristic of Essene, Qumran community theology, including his emphasis upon a temple made without hands and straying of the general populace from God's commandments, the killing of the prophets, and the sons of man Melchizedek tradition. Okay. Verse 8. There's a lot of recalling stuff in this, is what he's going to say. And he gave him the covenant of circumcision. And so Abraham became the father of Isaac and circumcised him on the 8th day. And Abraham became the father of Jacob, and Jacob of the 12 patriarchs. Only once he has established Abraham's, or Israel's, inheritance of the land does Stephen introduce the concept of the covenant. The inheritance was not only physical territory, but also a covenantal relationship with God, of which circumcision is the seal. Whoa, he actually uses the idea of seal. I think they use it some other place in the New Testament. But the idea that we're sealed by the Spirit through faith, baptism of the Spirit. But baptism and circumcision went together for converts in the first century. So that kind of is cool to think about that. That circumcision was a seal for the Jewish people prior to the new covenant. Sarah conceived Isaac when she was 90, and Abraham was 100 when he was born. Abraham circumcising Isaac on the 8th day as God has previously given ordinance. Isaac's fathered Jacob and Esau through Rebekah. The sages ascribed to Jacob such sanctity that he has no need to be circumcised after his birth, but was born circumcised. So that's what the sages say. Interesting. Jacob was also born circumcised, for it is stated, and Jacob was a wholehearted man dwelling in tents. Jacob fathered 12 sons from Leah, Rachel, Bilhah, and Zilpah. Although the designation of Jacob's sons as the 12 patriarchs is rare, they are known as such in the book of the Testament of the 12 patriarchs, which is associated in Essene circles. The 12 constitute the ancestors of the 12 tribes, and thus from the model of the 12 apostles, for the 12 apostles. So you see, he has things that maybe Samaritan, sound kind of Essene, sound kind of John the Baptist out in the wilderness group of people. Let's continue. 9 through 15. This is going to be, I'm going to zoom out a little bit for this one. There we go. Sorry, the book was on my keyboard. 9 through 15. Okay. And the patriarchs became jealous of Joseph and sold him into Egypt, and yet God was with him and rescued him from all his afflictions and granted him favor and wisdom in the sight of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And he made him governor over Egypt and all his household. Now a famine came over all of Egypt and Canaan, the great affliction with it. And our fathers could find no food. But when Jacob heard that there was grain in Egypt, he sent our fathers there the first time. And on the second visit, Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And Joseph's family was disclosed to Pharaoh. And Joseph sent word and invited Jacob, his father, and all his relatives to come to him, 75 persons in all. And Jacob went down to Egypt, and there passed away, he and his fathers. At this point, Stephen begins to highlight Israel's ambiguous history with God, obedient and wayward in turns, yet always preserving the possibility of redemption. While the history recounted in Qumran Damascus documents denounces Jacob's sons, who were punished in accordance with their mistakes, and in Egypt their sons walked in stubbornness of their hearts, plotting against God's precepts, and each day doing what was right in their own eyes. That's a Qumran document they're talking about. So it's kind of an oral tradition of certain people. Stephen concentrates on God's plan to deliver his people first, through Joseph and then through Moses, both messianic prototypes. They really are. Jacob's brothers become jealous. Guys, that sounds like the parable of the prodigal son. The son who stays around and never really leaves God, never really leaves the father, gets jealous when the other son comes back and a father welcomes him back with open arms and slaughters a bull and kind of does this whole celebration. He's like, how come he gets that celebration and I don't? Little jealousy. It's okay. Yeah, get that ball. Jacob's brothers become jealous of Joseph on account of his dreams of aggrandizement in which they would serve him, and rid themselves of the threat which they considered him to pose by selling him as a slave. Okay, so that's interesting because he's playing off those words of jealousy, and that's kind of the theme that's going on with the Sadducees. Sadducees were jealous of Pharisees. Sadducees especially in the Sanhedrin. The people loved the Pharisees. People hated the Sadducees, to the point where the Sadducees, even though they were a big majority in the Sanhedrin, people listened to the Pharisees. So they had to go along with a lot of what the Pharisees said just because the people loved them, even though they were a minority in the leadership. Luke has previously described jealousy of the apostles. As with Jesus after him, God was with Joseph. Luke has previously described Jesus, also like Joseph, as increasing in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and men. Luke 2:52. God had a purpose for Joseph and raised him up from slavery to be Pharaoh's governor, so that when famine fell on Canaan, Jacob could send his son to buy grain from Egypt. The famine was of sufficient length to necessitate 2 trips. Joseph finally disclosing his identity to his brothers on the second. His origin was thus also revealed to Pharaoh. At Pharaoh's encouragement, Joseph invited his family to move to Canaan, from Canaan to Egypt. The biblical tradition puts the number of Jacob's family who went down to Egypt at 70. Stephen's count of 75 is found both in the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament. I keep on looking at this camera. Not today. And in Genesis 46:27. You're good. And Exodus 1:5. And in the Qumran fragments. Okay. 2 alternative traditions of this text evidently existed independently, as witnessed by Philo's attempt to harmonize them by arguing that an extra 5, symbolic, because Philo was so, he was all about allegory too, so everything meant something to him. And he tried to make up this difference by arguing that the extra 5, symbolic of the senses, disappeared when Jacob received his new name. It's such an interesting little aside. The number of biblical quotations through Stephen's speech indicates his familiarity with Scripture and his capacity to cite it freely. That means he was an educated Jewish boy. That's what many of them were. Okay. That was not long for how many verses there are. Verse 16, and their bones were later moved to Shechem and placed in a tomb that Abraham had bought for a certain sum of money from the sons of Hamor in Shechem. Although both Jacob and Joseph died in Egypt, Joseph sought to receive Pharaoh's permission to bury his father according to his wishes in the grave which I, Jacob, dug for myself in the land of Canaan, Genesis 50 verse 5, i.e., in the cave of the field of the Machpelah before Mamre, which Abraham had bought along with the field for a burial site, Genesis 50:13. Not having access to the same privilege he had gained for his father, Joseph besought his brothers to take his bones out of Egypt, convinced that God would bring his descendants up from the land to the land which he had promised an oath to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, where he too could lie in peace, in Genesis 50, verse 24. The biblical text records that the generation which entered the land, quote, buried the bones of Joseph, which the sons of Israel brought up from Egypt at Shechem in the place of the ground which Joseph had bought from the sons of Hamor, the son of Shechem, which he had become inheritance for Joseph's sons. Contemporary sources relate that the other patriarchs were buried at the cave of Machpelah with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. A midrash, which is just kind of like a sermon, oral tradition sermon by Jewish folks, recorded a few years after Jesus, but it was kind of alive at the time too, orally. A midrash comments, and how do we know that the bones of the tribal ancestors were taken up with him, Joseph? Because it says, with you, Exodus 13:19. Rabbi Levi explains Joseph's request as comparable to, quote, a man who brought his wine into the cellar, and thieves came and took it away, the barrels, and drank their contents. When the owner of the wine found that those had stolen the barrels of wine, he said to them, you have drunk the wine, at least return the casks to their place. Similarly, it was from Shechem that the brothers of Joseph had stolen him and sold him. And when he was about to die, he adjured them, my brothers, you have stolen me from Shechem while I was alive. I pray that you return my bones to Shechem. That's a fun little tradition they had going. That's interesting. Lying between Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, Shechem was a Samaritan holy city. Stephen asserts that Abraham, rather than Jacob, had purchased the field in Shechem from the sons of Hamor. Abraham, in fact, acquired the cave of Malpecha in Hebron from Ephron the Hittite. The conflation of transactions may perhaps be explained in light of Stephen's tendency towards telescoping events. Okay. All a bit technical. We're getting there, though. 17 through 22. Okay. But as the time of the promise was approaching, which God had assured to Abraham, the people increased and multiplied in Egypt, until there arose another king over Egypt who knew nothing about Joseph. That's the beginning of Exodus, by the way. It was he who took the shrewd advantage of our race and mistreated our fathers so that they would expose their infants and they would not survive. And it was at this time that Moses was born. And he was lovely in the sight of God. And he was nurtured 3 months in his father's home. And after he had been exposed, Pharaoh's daughter took him away and nurtured him as their own son. And Moses was educated in all the learnings of the Egyptians, and he was a man of power in words and deeds. The expression, as the time of the promise was approaching, which God promised Abraham, refers to the Exodus, the end of the 400 years which the people had been enslaved in Egypt and their return to the land. Stephen indicates that God prepared and orchestrated the turn of events, so when the time was ready, the people of Israel had increased greatly and multiplied and became exceedingly mighty, so that the land was filled with them, Exodus 1:7. The enslavement began with the rise to power of a new Pharaoh who knew not Joseph, Exodus 1:8, and invited and invited and respected guests into a people of bondage. This king is commonly referred to as Ramesses II, from 1290 to 1224 BCE, on the basis of the mention of the city of Ramesses in Exodus 1:11. Part of the measures taken to reduce their strength and numbers was the reduction in population growth through the exposure of all male children by casting them into the Nile. Stephen presents the picture as though the torment inflicted by the Egyptians caused the people of Israel to save their sons, as it were, by killing them before they were able to suffer. In Jewish eyes, Pharaoh's intention to deal wisely with the people of Israel is interpreted as taking shrewd advantage, i.e., exploitation. Our race is a fairly typical epithet of the nation. While they were, quote, while they were in this plight, a further incident had the effect of stimulating the Egyptians yet more to exterminate our race. That's Josephus talking there. Moses was born at the time as one who, like Joseph before him, found favor in God's sight. The expression, in God's sight, may be taken in its full sense to indicate that it's in God's sight, or may be possibly convey a superlative elective force of like exceedingly. While the biblical text merely states that his mother hid him from 3 months, Stephen links Moses specifically with his father, possibly in verbal analogy to the association with the patriarchs in verse 8. A Midrashic tradition records that when Pharaoh declared his intentions to kill the firstborn males, Moses' father Amram divorced his wife, as did all the men of Israel. Once it had grown too dangerous to keep him secret any longer, his mother put him in a basket and concealed it in the reeds on the bank of the Nile. There he was found by Pharaoh's daughter, who took him out of the water and brought him up to her as her own son. In the context of the gifts and abilities which Hellenistic Jewish writers attribute to the fathers of all science and culture in such varied fields as arithmetic, geometry, astrology, philosophy, education, poetry, and music, Stephen's description of Moses is very modest and couched in biblical language. For Stephen, as a Hellenist, Stephen places him firmly in the biblical prophetic tradition by describing him as a man of power in words and deeds. Moses' own protestation that, quote, I have never been eloquent, neither recently nor in time past, nor since you have spoken to your servant, for I am slow of speech and slow of tongue, is countered by God's promise that I, even I, will be with your mouth and teach you what you are to say. Exodus 4:12. Interesting. 23 to 24. This is the fun, this is basically a history lesson, guys. From Stephen's point of view, and we're trying to read into everything he's saying. 23 to 24. But when he was approaching the age of 40, it entered his mind to visit his brethren, the sons of Israel. And when he saw one of them being treated unjustly, he defended him and took vengeance for the oppressed by striking down the Egyptian. Yay, history. It's on the tag, guys. It's on the tag. Educational history, reading aloud. It's literally everything I'm doing right now. Although the biblical text does not record Moses' precise age when he went out among his brethren, Stephen's remark corresponds to Midrashic tradition, which states that Moses was 40 at the time, having spent previous years in Pharaoh's palace. The number is a symbolic unit, signifying both generation and maturity, because 40 is the number of completion and complete testing in the Bible. 40 days, 40 nights, the ark, all these ideas, complete testing and completion. Multiples of 40 figure prominently throughout Moses' life. According to Jewish tradition, he was 40 when he killed the Egyptian taskmaster and fled to Midian. 80 when he saw the burning bush and appeared to Pharaoh, and 120 at his death. The biblical text also very reticent about how Moses knew his heritage and was what prompted him to associate himself with his own people. Such identification was nevertheless sufficiently strong to lead him to kill an Egyptian on their behalf. 26 through 29. And he supposed that his brethren understood that God was granting them deliverance through him, but they did not understand. Wow. I love how he's putting this all on them. Look at this. This is all, he's basically being like, you guys look at all this history. You're in line with it. Stephen juxtaposes God's plan for redemption. Like in the verse itself, yeah. He supposed that his brethren understood that God was granting them deliverance through him, but they did not understand. Like, how much is that Jesus, right? He's saying even Moses went through this. Wouldn't the Messiah? Like that, he's kind of making that point. They did not understand that he was there to save them. And on the following day he appeared to them as they were fighting together, and he tried to reconcile to them in peace, saying, "Men, you are brethren. Why do you injure one another?" But the one who was injuring his neighbor pulled him away, saying, "Who made you a ruler and judge over us? You do not mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday, do you?" And at that remark, Moses fled and became an alien in the land of Midian, where he became the father of 2 sons. Again, Stephen juxtaposes God's plan for redemption against the people's hard-heartedness. Ruler and judge are both terms which designate the leaders among the people, both also naturally associated with the idea of a deliverer. While the Tanakh does not record the reason for Moses' supposition that his brethren would understand his role as redeemer, both the biblical text and Urashic sources emphasize his identification with his people, despite having been brought up in Pharaoh's house. This religious man went out from the palace only on 2 occasions, being confined therein because of his beauty. He went out on those occasions only because they wanted to perform the service for the people. And he went out on the 2nd day, Exodus 2:13. These were the 2 occasions. And he looked on their burdens. And what is the meaning of, and he looked upon their burdens and wept, saying, "Woe is me for you, what that I could die for you." Wow. This is in Exodus Rabbah. This is a commentary. And they're a Jewish oral commentary on stuff. And they're putting Moses as, "I wish I could die for you." Tell me this doesn't just pull up Jesus imagery. "Woe is me for you, would that I could die for you." He saw great burdens being put upon small people and light burdens among big people. So he left his suit. Oh my gosh, that's so much Jesus too. Heavy burdens on small people, soft little burdens on large people. Great reversal kind of language, right? So he left his suit and rearranged their burdens. Even if the reference is first to vengeance against the Egyptian on account of his oppression, the idea of deliverance still appears. Stephen glosses the verse, "And he said to the offender, 'Why are you striking your companion?' Exodus 2:13, to highlight the fact that it was unseemly for 2 Israelites to be fighting one another in the face of the Egyptian oppression. Although by doing this, he also minimizes Moses' insight into who instigated the quarrel. According to a Midrashic tradition, the 2 protagonists were Dathan and Abiram, whose later participation in Korach's rebellion proved that they strove. Despite this knowledge of his calling, Moses fled to Midian from Pharaoh's retribution, presumably over the Egyptian's murder and or Moses' betrayal of his upbringing. He named his first son Gershom, since he considered himself a stranger, Sham. Stranger there, Gershom. And his second is Eleazar, for his escape from Pharaoh's wrath. thereby underscoring the fact that he was forced to exile from his own people before he was able to fulfill his calling. Wow. Underscoring the fact that he was forced to exile from his own people before he was able to fulfill his calling. Jesus much again? Moses' designation as a first redeemer. Because this is, guys, this is it'll probably read it. It's probably going to say it. Yep, it is, so I won't even say it. I always get ahead of myself by saying stuff that they're going to say. Moses' designation as the first redeemer indicates how he serves as a model for the Messiah, the last redeemer, both of whom were rejected when they appeared before the people the first time. This is from Pirkei Avot, I believe. Sayings of the Father. It's a Jewish. My beloved is like a gazelle. Rabbi Yitzhak said, as a gazelle appears and then disappears, so Moses, the first Messiah, appeared. They thought Moses was the first Messiah. Why do you think Jesus compared him to him so much? I mean, he literally was. He saved people from slavery and brought them to the promised land. I mean, Jesus saves us from our slavery to sin and brings us to the kingdom, right? Rabbi Yitzhak said, as a gazelle appears and then disappears, so Moses, the first Messiah, appeared among Israel and then disappeared from among them. For how long did he disappear? Rabbi Yudah Barabi said, for 3 months. With reference to his absence and his reappearance, it is written, and they met Moses, who stood unexpectedly in the way, Exodus 5:20. Rabbi Berechiah said in the name of Rabbi Levi, like the first Redeemer, so the last Redeemer. As the first one appeared among Israel and then disappeared from among them, so the last Redeemer will appear among Israel, then disappear from among them. And how long will he disappear from among them? Rabbi Tanhuma said in the name of Rabbi Hama, who said it in the name of Rabbi Hosea, and Rabbi Menahema said it in the name of Rabbi Hamar Bar. Okay, anyway, for 45 days, with reference to this period of Scripture saying, from the time that the continual burnt offering shall be taken away, and the detestable things that cause appallment set up, there shall be 1,290 days. They're talking about Daniel's prophecy, 12:11. And then goes on to say, happy is he who waits and comes to the 1,305 and 30 days. These days, 45 above, and the number given in the previous verse, to what do they refer? They refer to the period of 45 days during which the Messiah, who will appear among the children of Israel, will disappear from among them again. All right, that is a big quote of all that, just to give us the point of how parallel Moses is with the Messiah. And that's kind of Stephen's point, right? They treated Moses like this. Moses had to go through these things. Why wouldn't the second Redeemer have to go through these things? 30 through 34. And after 40 years had passed, an angel appeared to him in the wilderness of Mount Sinai, in the flame of a burning thorn bush. And when Moses saw it, he began to marvel at the sight. And as he approached to look more closely, there came the voice of the Lord. I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Moses shook with fear and would not venture to look. But the Lord said to him, take off your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt, and I have heard their groans, and I have come down to deliver them. Come now, I will send you to Egypt. As in the previous reference, the Midrash states that Moses was in Midian for 40 years, a figure possibly derived from the statement in Exodus 7:7 that Moses was 80 when he spoke to Pharaoh. The biblical account variously designates the person who addressed Moses from the burning bush as the angel of the Lord. Melach Hayah, or Yah. Yeah, exactly. God and the Lord. So angel of the Lord, God and the Lord. That's Exodus 3, 2, 4, and 6. That's all the way they're referenced. Stephen identifies him with the voice of the Lord. Midrashic sources state that wherever the angel of the Lord appears, God's presence is also manifest. Okay. Jewish tradition frequently associates this angel with Michael, one of the two angels identified by name in Scripture. Michael is credited with visiting Abraham at Mamre, forestalling Isaac's death, wrestling with Jacob, descending with God on Sinai, guiding the people through the wilderness, fighting with Joshua, appearing to Gideon, and overcoming the prince of Persia and the dragon in Daniel. Since Michael is also said to sit on God's right hand and to intercede on Israel's behalf, he is further associated with Metatron, the lesser Yah. Metatron is actually, it's funny because it's another one of these ideas of different divinities in the Godhead and how they were trying to think about these things. Metatron, the lesser Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Melchizedek, and the angel of peace. Man, Metatron is going to be a while for now. Megatron? Exactly. That's what I always thought. Metatron. 22:3. I'm going to have to look that up in another time. That's in chapter 22 when they finally go over who Metatron is. But Metatron's also I think we read about him when we read the Jewish Gospels. The Jewish Gospels is that non-believing Orthodox rabbi that talks about New Testament stuff. That's really interesting. The tradition may also reflect... Yeah, that's where I am. Be reflected in Stephen's reference to the hand of the angel who assisted him in fulfilling his tasks. Stephen specifically associates the angel who was speaking with him, Moses, on Mount Sinai, with the congregation in the wilderness. Stephen does not mention Horeb and considers God to have identified himself to Moses before warning him to remove his shoes in deference to the sanctity of the place. Place again. The latter being an epithet closely associated with the temple, the place. The need to remove one's shoes in the presence of the holy is elaborated in Midrashic tradition. Quote, wherever the Shekhinah, which is God's glorious presence, appears, one must not go about with shoes on, and so we find in the case of Joshua, put off thy shoes. Hence the priests ministered in the temple barefooted. Ooh, I didn't know that. While Stephen omits the God of Isaac and Jacob, he speaks of the God of your fathers in the plural, a reading which conforms to the Samaritan version. See? All these little hints about possibilities. Qumran, Samaritan, maybe it's like a combination of both, who knows? 35 through 38. Man, we have a lot to go. Because this is just a history lesson Stephen's given us. This Moses whom you disowned. Don't you remember when they said, this Jesus whom you rejected? I mean, isn't that what Peter says earlier in Acts? This Jesus. And here's Stephen. This Moses whom they disowned, saying, who made you a ruler and a judge, is the one whom God sent to be both ruler and deliverer with the help of the angel who appeared to him in the thorn bush. This man led them out, performing wonders and signs in the land of Egypt and in the Red Sea and in the wilderness for 40 years. This is Moses, who said to the sons of Israel, God shall raise up for you a prophet like me from your brethren. This is the one who was in the congregation in the wilderness together with the angel who was speaking to him on Mount Sinai and who was with our fathers, and he received living oracles to pass on to you. What's up, Tagna? It's all good. Hi. Welcome. Stephen returns and picks up his central point here, namely that the people had always rejected the prophets, beginning with Joseph and Moses and ending with Jesus. The phrase, this Moses, corresponds to Peter's use of this man to reference to Jesus. I'm telling you, every time I try to say something that pops in my head, the guy talks about it. The demonstrative, which reflects the Samaritan formulary construction, carries the force of it. It is the same man who, emphasizing the significance of his actions, Stephen repeating it 6 times. Living oracles are the words of life which the Torah embodies. Quote, God came down to Sinai to give the Decalogue so the world should not totter, as it says, the earth trembled and the heavens also dropped at the presence of God. Psalm 68:8. The mountains also quaked before God, and also the pillars of heaven shook, and Israel also trembled, as it says, and all the people trembled. Exodus 19:16. The mountain trembled, for it says, all the whole mount quaked greatly. And why did they all quake? Because he spoke words of life, and the prophet cries out, the lion hath roared, who will not fear? Amos. Okay, that's a rabbinical kind of breakdown. In direct negation of the wilderness accusations against him, Stephen's description of Moses demonstrates his respect for the first Redeemer, right? We talked about that. Who delivered the people from Egypt, performed signs and wonders, spoke with angels and with God himself, passed on his word to the people, and foretold God's rising of a prophet like himself. Prophet like Moses. That's earlier too. They were expecting that one because Moses said it. God will raise up a prophet like me. You should listen to him. Deuteronomy 18:18 follows Exodus 20:21 in the Samaritan text. Okay. The Ta'eb, or restorer, who would perform miracles, restore the law and true worship, and bring knowledge to the nations and the world, played a significant role in Samaritan belief. Interesting. Okay, we're going to keep this going. And our fathers were unwilling to be obedient to him, but repudiated him, and in their hearts turned back to Egypt, saying to Aaron, make for us gods who will go before us. And this Moses who led us out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what happened to him. And at the time they made a calf and brought a sacrifice to the idol, and were rejoicing in the hands of their work of their hands. But God turned away and delivered them up to serve the host of heaven, as it is written in the book of the prophets. It was not to me that you offered victims and sacrifices 40 years in the wilderness, was it, O house of Israel? You also took along the tabernacle of Molech and the star of the god Rompha, the images which you made to worship them, and I will remove you beyond Babylon. Itchy throat. Impatient with Moses' disappearance on Mount Sinai, the people not only turned to Aaron in his place, but also began to worship the golden calf, which they made with their hands as if to ensure they would gain their purposes. Although the biblical text attributes their wish to find another leader to bring them back to Egypt to a later period, when they had been wandering in the wilderness for a year, the people constantly murmured against Moses and Aaron and against God. In response, God turns his back to them and gives them up to worshiping idols. The term hosts of heaven, originally a reference to the sun, moon, and stars, is a common biblical designation for foreign gods. Although this type of worship is typically ascribed to the period during which Israel lay under Assyrian domination, when God turns away or turns his face away, he delivers his people up to their enemies for himself, or himself fights against Israel. Since he now interprets the Pentateuchal account via Amos, Stephen identifies his source as it is written in the book of the prophets. So he's literally saying, yeah, this is how Amos sees it, i.e. the 12 minor prophets, which form one book in the Hebrew Bible. Yeah, exactly. The wilderness period is treated differently. Itchy throat, I know. The wilderness period is treated from two different perspectives in Jewish tradition, one quite negative and one more positive. Oh, he's just quoting Daniel Boyarin. That's the guy who we were just referencing his book. While the Pentateuchal texts highlight Israel's rebelliousness during the wandering in the desert, Hosea declares, I found Israel like grapes in the wilderness. I saw your forefathers as the earliest fruit on the fig tree in the first season, but they came to Baal Peor and devoted themselves to shame. Hosea 9:10. Jeremiah also states, I remember concerning you the devotion of your youth, the love of your betrothals, your following after me in the wilderness. Though, where we go? Through a land not shown. There you go. The quotation from the Septuagint, sipping on some hot water and lemon juice and honey to keep my... Exactly. Well, I had my stuff. Hey, Paris Plays! It's afternoon. Not for me. Don't scare me like that. I can't believe you, Paris. Hello. The quotation from the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. Always remember that. LXX is what you'll see. Septuagint means 70. That's what happens with Mountain Time, guys. It's like last night. I streamed at 11, and I got done at like 12:30, and everybody's like, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Sorry, guys. The quotation from the Septuagint, Amos 5:25, closely resembles Jeremiah 2:22 and interprets this form of the tradition, translating it from the eve of the Assyrian invasions and exile of the northern kingdom, as if to say to that while the people offered sacrifices in the wilderness, they did so to the host of heaven rather than to God, on account of which God sent them to exile beyond Damascus. The author of the Damascus document from Qumran employs this same text in his description of God's punishment of Israel's rebellion and reward of the faithful. I'm not going to read it because that's basically what it says. Sekuth and Kiyun both represent the Akkadian god Ninib, associated with the planet Saturn, while Molech in the Hebrew, king, Molech. All these words variously pointed with the vowels of words conveying abomination. The Septuagint replaces Kiyun with Raphan, Egyptian representation of the god of Saturn, etc., etc. Although Stephen also speaks of the assembly in the wilderness, he alters the reference to Damascus in the Masoretic text to Babylon, the more familiar allusion with regard to the exile. Scholars have suggested that the Qumran designation, the land of Damascus, serves as a cryptic reference to Babylon, the original birthplace of the sect, or as a symbolic name for Qumran. Interesting. 1:35, yep. 12:36, yep. East Coast Central Time. Now I'm Mountain. Oh, we need somebody from the Pacific. We need a Stratus in here. Through 50. Wow. Our fathers had a tabernacle of testimony in the wilderness, just as he who spoke to the Moses directed him to make it according to the pattern which he had seen, and having received it in their turn, our fathers brought it in with Joseph upon dispossessing the nation whom God drove out before the fathers until the time of David. And David found favor in God's sight and asked that he might find a dwelling place for the God of Jacob. But it was Solomon who built a house for him. However, the Most High does not dwell in houses made by human hands, as the prophet says, quote, Heaven is my throne, and earth is my footstool of my feet. What kind of house will you build for me, says the Lord? Or what kind of place is there for me to repose? Was it not my hand which made all these things? And that's like reference to, I'm sure he's going to say it now that I'm going to say it, but the way Paul says it, later on, he's like, the Most High does not dwell in houses made by human hands. Right? We'll see. That's what Paul says, I'm pretty sure. The transition between verse 43 and 44 appear rather abrupt, despite the fact that commentators point to the association between the tabernacle of Molech and the tabernacle of testimony. Stephen is possibly picking up the positive evaluation of the wilderness period here. His words and thought bear a striking resemblance to an opening Mishnah of Pirkei Avot. I said Pirkei Avot. That's sayings of the fathers. Pirkei Avot, sayings of the fathers. It's in the Mishnah. It's a Jewish oral text, essentially, which sets out to the chain of tradition of the oral Torah, which Moses received on Mount Sinai. Quote, Moses received the Torah at Sinai and transmitted it to Joshua, Joshua to the elders to the people. The Tabernacle of Testimony was also called because it housed the tablets on which the Ten Commandments were inscribed as witness to the covenant between God and the people. The Septuagint employs the expression to designate the tent of meeting where everyone who sought the Lord would go out. The expression, he who spoke to Moses, which reflects a typical biblical phrase, and God spoke with Moses saying, also implies Moses' status as a prophet who God spoke face to face with God, who spoke face to face with God. According to the biblical text, God declares to Moses, quote, "And let them construct a sanctuary for me that I may dwell among them, according to all that I am going to show you as a pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnitures, just so shall you construct it." God showed Moses the pattern on Mount Sinai. Okay, let's read some more rabbinical statements. Rabbi Joshua of Sichnin said in the name of Rabbi Levi, when the Holy One, blessed is he, commanded Moses, make me a tabernacle, he should have just put up 4 poles and spread out a tabernacle over them. We are therefore forced to infer that the Holy One, blessed is he, showed Moses on high red fire, green fire, black fire, white fire, and said to him, make it according to the fashion thereof, which has been shown to you in this on the mountain here. Rabbi Berechiah said in the name of Rabbi Belzala, likened the matter to a king who, possessing an exquisite robe, worked in precious stones, said to the members of the house, make me another like it. And the latter said to him, my lord and king, am I able to make one like that? Then the king said to him, I with my glory and you with your dyes will make a worthy robe. In the same way, Moses said to the Holy One, blessed is he. Oh God, am I God to be able to make these things? And he said to him, do it according to the fashion which I am showing you, etc., with blue and purple and scarlet and fine linen. If, said the Holy One, blessed be he, to Moses, you make below the same as which I have above, I shall leave my counselors on high, and coming down below will accommodate my Shekhinah, which is God's glorious presence, to the confined space in the midst below. That's Numbers Rabbah. So that's like the rabbis being like, what is this like? How can I compare it to something that, and that's a decent little comparison. He's like, this guy has this amazing robe with fine things that only the richest person can have, and he's like, make me another one like it. And they're like, how can I do it? It's too grand. It's too great. You showed me this amazing heavenly vision, Lord. Well, do your best according to the way that I showed you. Following their entry into the land, the people set up the tent of meeting in Shiloh, successive generations taking charge of it until David's kingdom. The Septuagint expands on Joshua 24:33 to say that the Israelites carried the ark of God around among themselves, and Phinehas entered into the priesthood in place of Eleazar, his father. Of Joshua, God also said, this day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that you may know that just as I have been with Moses, I will be with you. Joshua 3:7. The allusion to the dispossession of the nations may refer to the fact that God brought his people into their inheritance. Stephen's series of messianic figures now arrives at David. So this is Stephen literally just showing the pattern through Scripture. All these people were treated the same by God and by the people that God chose them to lead in the same ways. God's using them, God's working to save them, and the people are they're just doubting them along the way. I mean, they doubted Moses, they doubted Joseph. Now they're doubting Joshua, right? It's just going and so forth. All these messianic, we're not going to call them types. Types is a little limited, but they're fractals. Time for some deep stuff. I've said this before, it's also a first century toolbox kind of thing. Fractals. Fractals. What is a fractal? Oh, this is a fractal. Images of fractal. It's a fixed geometrical placement. It has rules, basically mathematical shape that's infinitely complex. It's a pattern that repeats forever. So within this huge pattern, is a smaller version of the pattern that makes up the whole pattern. It's the same thing in Scripture. You have not just like, oh, we have the story that kind of represents it. It's this, the whole story of the Bible is encapsulated in small stories that makes up the whole story. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. So yes, Stephen's series of messianic figures now arrives at David. David found favor in God's sight. Stephen evidently associates God's benefaction with David's desire to build a fitting construction to house the ark. While God refuses David's request on the grounds that he has not yet given peace to his people, he promises that he will establish a house, or i.e. dynasty, for David in recognition of David's faithfulness, and that his own son would build him a house for his name. Some well-attested manuscripts read House of Jacob rather than God of Jacob. While as the more difficult reading, the former should perhaps be retained. The context requires God, the reference clearly being Psalm 132:5. Solomon himself wondered at the dedication of the temple which he built according to God's command, whether God has need of such a place. Quote, "But will God need indeed dwell with us on earth? Behold, heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain you. How much less this house which I've built?" 1 Kings 8:27. Some contemporary sources develop the idea of God's uncontainability with reference to a future temple, which God will build with his own hands. A passage, okay. So there's a Qumran text that's literally going to go through it all. What's up, Dabster? Welcome. Hi, bye. Woo, hi. Thanks for coming in. Why not? We'll read. Qumran's fun. You don't get to read Dead Sea Scrolls much. "So not will an enemy strike him any more, nor will a son of iniquity afflict him again as in the past." Hi, bye. Heard. "From that day on which I appointed judges over my people, Israel." This refers to the house which I will establish for him in those days, as is written in the book of Moses. "The temple of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, your hands will be established." The Lord, I'm just going to say the Lord, because I don't feel comfortable saying his name, especially with Jewish context and Jewish people possibly watching as well. The Lord shall reign forever and ever. This refers to the house unto which shall not enter forever either the Amorite or the Moabite or the foreigner or the proselyte, never, because his holy ones are there. "The Lord shall reign forever. He will appear over it forever. Foreigners shall not again lay it to waste as they laid it to waste in the past, the temple of Israel on account of their sins. And he commanded to build for himself a temple of man, to offer him in it before him the works of thanksgiving." Okay, that's not as crazy as I thought it would be. The epithet Most High referenced the Hebrew El Elyon, a designation which characteristically appears in the Melchizedek tradition. Melchizedek is not only a priest, but he's also associated with the Son of Man in the Qumran Melchizedek. In certain Jewish traditions, Melchizedek's definitely associated with Son of Man in Daniel. A motif which Stephen recalls in his vision just before he's killed, and which also is linked to Daniel 7:18 with the saints of the highest one. Further evidence concerning the belief in the eschatological temple built by God himself may be found in the Midrashic tradition, which appears to lay behind Revelation 21:22. Quote, "And I saw no temple in it in Jerusalem, for the Lord God, the Almighty, and the Lamb are its temple, and the city has no need for the sun or the moon for it to shine upon it, for the glory of God has illuminated it, and the lamp is the Lamb." Oh, that's a cool little... The lamp is the Lamb. "And you shall charge the sons of Israel, and they shall bring you clear oil and make a lamp burn continually." The Midrash says, "God said to Moses, say to the children of Israel, my sons, this is the world you needed, the light of the temple. My sons, in this world you needed the light of the temple, which came from candles which you lit in it." But if you didn't know this, fun little side. Yeah, I was in there with it. Yeah. Melchizedek's a tricky one. There's here and there, but knowing some of that Midrash stuff and Qumran stuff is very interesting. But if you didn't know this, when they built the temple, they made it, usually you want a temple to take the light from the outside and bring it in. That's not how even the windows were designed in the temple, because they would light menorahs, and they made it to where the menorah had the small part on the inside of the temple, and the window expanded to be wider as it went out. The design of the temple, in their minds, was to be a light for the world, and they would put the lights and the menorahs to shine out to the world, not to get the light to come into the temple from the sun, etc., but to put the light from inside the temple out to the world. So that's a very interesting little thing I learned. So yes, the temple which came from the candles which you lit it. But in the world to come, because of its same lamp, I will bring you a king Messiah who is compared to a lamp. As it is written, there will be a cause, there I will cause the horn of David, that's a messianic name, to spring forth. I have prepared a lamp for mine anointed. That's Psalm 132:17. He who offers the sacrifice of thanksgiving honors me, and to him who orders his way rightly, I shall show the salvation of God. Psalm 50:23. God said, in this world you are in need of a lamp, but in the future nations I will come to your light, the kings and to the brightness of your rising. So they already thought about this stuff, in other words. According to another tradition, just as an earthly lamp in the temple of the world will be suspended. Excuse me. According to another tradition, just as the earthly lamp in the temple of this world will be superseded by the Messiah, who is the future lamp, there will be no need for light in the temple in the world to come, for God himself will be Jerusalem's light and glory. It is possible to define the whole concept as an eschatological spiritualization of the temple and its worship, the earthly temple merit consisting of leading to its own replacement by God and his Messiah in the Messianic age. Since the earthly temple is a pattern of the heavenly one, God's glory can be said to form a spiritual sanctuary in Jerusalem of the Messianic age, whose lamp will be the Messiah. Stephen recalls the motif of God's glory right in the beginning of his speech, and it reappears in verse 55, where he sees the glory of God revealed. God, we could probably go through all this. I think we should. It's not going to be hard. Now he really starts to talk trash, and these guys get a little mad. You men who are stiff-necked and uncircumcised in heart and ears are always resisting the Holy Spirit. You are doing just as your fathers did. Which one of the prophets did your fathers not persecute? And he's calling fathers because of their leadership, so they're in the same position as the people who killed the prophets before. And they killed those who had previously announced the coming of the righteous one, whose betrayers and murderers you have now become. You who received the law as ordained by angels, and yet did not keep it. Wow. This is going to get him, guys. At this point, Stephen breaks off his address to directly indict his audience for not heeding the words of the prophets, one of whom he has just quoted. This is precisely the point of his speech, that in rejecting Jesus as God's Messiah, the people are repudiating God's presence. They have received the Torah, but they're not observing it or keeping it, guarding it. Those are also the same words. Stiff-necked and uncircumcised are both biblical terms which describe Israel's rebelliousness towards God. The fact that circumcision is associated in various contemporary texts with the evil inclination. Now I have to go back into this. Not like it's bad. It's just one little aside. There's a fun rabbinical saying that lines up with Jesus when Jesus talks about you can choose mammon, wealth, money, materialism really is what it is, or God. You can only have one master. You'll either love one or hate the other, despise one and cling to the other. Right? Jesus talks about that. Paul talks about it, kind of like wrestling between flesh and spirit. But it comes from, or at least it's associated with, a rabbinical saying that has a play on the Hebrew words. You have the yotzer and the yetzer. It's two different words using the same three letters, but they're different roots and different meanings. So you have the yotzer and the yetzer. The rabbi said you can only You can only please one, the Yotzer, the creator, or the Yetzer, the inclination, or what they ended up calling the Yetzer Hara, which means the evil inclination. It's a big point theologically for me because it's not just some external evil force that's causing you to do things that are sinful. It's not. It is part of you, an inclination, what we call the flesh, right? Or we call, just our fallen nature or sin in the world, or what do you want to call it? But there's an inclination in you that doesn't have to do with outside forces, that's evil in and of itself. It's the evil inclination to do these things. And it lines up with what Jesus talks about, the Greek word mammon, which can mean wealth, but it mostly means like materialism, like just getting the stuff of this world, wanting and desiring the temporary instead of the eternal. And that's the evil inclination. So you can only please one, and you're going to piss off the other. Excuse me for my language, but that's basically it. You're going to make mad your evil inclination when you please the Yotzer, your creator. And you're going to get, God is forgiving and loving, but it's not that it doesn't irritate him when we choose our inclination over him. And we won't please him when we choose our evil inclination. So I want to point that out because that's when he brings up evil inclination, that's what he's talking about. So they're following their evil inclination, their hard-heartedness, their uncircumcisedness. The fact that circumcision is associated with the evil inclination of men's heart leads to the natural link with the new heart, which God promises to bestow to women and men through the Holy Spirit. Quote, no one should walk in stubbornness of his heart in order to go astray, following his heart and his eyes and the musings of his inclination. Instead, he should circumcise in the community the foreskin of his tendency and of his stiff neck in order to lay a foundation of truth for Israel, for the community of the everlasting covenant. That is a Qumran text. The heart is deceitful, but exactly, desperately wicked. Who can understand it? And the heart in Hebrew is the mind and how we think of it. The heart is your mind, your will, and your emotion. Will. Your volition. Volition's a fancy word of saying what you will yourself to do. The driving force behind what you choose and want to do. So yes, the heart is deceitful among all things. What we choose to do, so a commandment, and just so you can get a little geeky, commandments in Greek and they're called volatives because they're commanding you to do it. I will you to do it. They're volatives. So change your volition, change how you will yourself to do certain things or not do certain things. But I love that. No one should walk in the stubbornness of his heart in order to go astray, following his heart and his eyes and the musing of his inclination. Instead, he should circumcise in the community the foreskin of his tendency and his stiff neck in order to lay a foundation of truth for Israel, for the community of the everlasting covenant. I'm really starting to love Qumran, guys. Dead Sea Scrolls, they were really, really, really conservative. They thought that the temple and the Pharisees were corrupt. They were in many ways, but they were like, they didn't even want anything to, even Jesus followed the temple kind of like structure a little bit. He honored it to some degree. He criticized the leaders, but it's not like he didn't go to the temple to do his mitzvot, his commandments. He's in the temple teaching when he's 12, right? Didn't you know you'd find me in my Father's house when Mary asked him? All those things. But Qumran was like, nope, sorry, we're making a temple in the wilderness, guys. So they're a little more extreme than Jesus. But you can see their zealousness for community and being set apart. Rebukes for disdaining God's messengers form a part of the chastisement which the people traditionally receive for their disobedience. Contemporary Jewish sources witness to a tradition concerning the ill treatment of the prophets. A cluster of stories arose most prominently from Zechariah's murder, based on Lamentations 2:20, although other statements demonstrate that other generations were responsible for similar acts. Quote, and I'm sending them witnesses, that I may witness against them, but they will not hear. And I will slay the witnesses also, and they will persecute those who seek... Wait, I? And they will slay the witnesses also, and they will persecute those who seek the law. That's Jubilees 1:12. Jubilees is a apocryphal, intertestamental book or writing. It was in the 1611 King James, guys. It was in the Bible before the Protestants ever took it out. I'm not saying it's canon, just saying it's very valuable to read these things to see what they were thinking at the time. Thou shalt not revile Elohim. Exodus 22:28. Rabbi Meir said, the citizens of Jerusalem were also smitten because they despised the prophets. For it says, but they mocked the messengers of God, 2 Chronicles 36:16. And it is written, quote, they have made their faces harder than a rock, but they have refused to return, Jeremiah 5:3. Since the prophets speak in God's name and through the Holy Spirit, the people's resistance is against God himself as well as the rejection of his plans and purposes in certain cases and on certain occasions. The commentary on Hosea from Qumran indicts indicts the people for being led astray by false hopes and associated with the contempt of God's commandments with the rejection of his prophets. Quote, Hosea 2:10, she does not know that it was I who gave her wheat, wine, and oil. I increased the silver and gold which they used for Baal. Its interpretation? They ate and became replete and forgot the God of justice, and cast behind their backs all the precepts which he had sent them through his servants the prophets. But they listened to those who misdirected them, and they acclaimed them and feared them in their blindness like gods. I'm loving Qumran. They got some good choice words to say that have us understand kind of the fancy word again, milieu, the cultural milieu, the mixture of the cultural stuff going on in the first century. They were talking about that. I'm sure Qumran people were out here preaching these things on the street, if not like in the back rooms and all these different things. Just as Peter calls his audience sons of the prophets in order to remind them that they are heirs of God's promised salvation, back in chapter 3, so Stephen indicts his listeners as heirs of those who refused to listen to God's words and killed the prophets. Matthew 23:31. Jesus says that too. You who killed the prophets. Oof. The latter foretold the coming of the prophet like Moses, whom, like many of the previous prophets, the people handed over to the government for execution. Stephen makes no distinction between the leaders and the people, but calls the whole nation to account. He himself becomes the latest addition to the list of those who died at the hands of the people. While most of the prophets' deaths are unrecorded in Scripture, aside from Zechariah's murder, later tradition ascribes a martyr's death to some. Various sources describe how Manasseh had Isaiah sawn in sunder. While Jeremiah's companions are said to have stoned him in exile in Egypt. Although the accounts of giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai in Exodus does not mention the presence of angels, numerous other passages assume they descended in great numbers. One midrash, one Jewish kind of commentary, says the verse, behold, I am going to send an angel before you to guard you along the way, Exodus 23:20, to explain the presence of the emissaries at the giving of the Torah. Okay, I'm not going to read that because you can kind of extrapolate from that. Stephen may also be referring to the prophets in speaking of angels, as, for example, the Midrashic tradition states, the prophets are also called malachim, which means angels, or messengers, really is what it means. This is an indictment by which it is written, and he sent a messenger, a malach, and brought us forth out of Egypt, Numbers 20:16. Was it then an angel of the Lord? Surely it was Moses. Why then do they call him malach? In fact, from this one are called malachim. Similarly, it says, and the messenger, malach of the Lord, came up from Gilgal to Bochim. Was it the angel? Surely it was Phinehas. Why then does it call him malach? The truth is, said Rabbi Shimon, that the face of Phinehas, when the Holy Spirit rested on him, flames like a torch. Rabbi Yochanan said there is a decisive passage which shows that the prophets are called malachim, namely, they spoke Haggai. Then spoke Haggai, the Lord's messenger, and the Lord's message. Thus we are bound to conclude from the decisive passage that the prophets are called malachim. So prophets with angels? That's so crazy. Buy a new cable. Is it going again? Is it going again? I just need a longer cable. I think that's all it is. But, Losty, tell me. Bum, 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 bum. Testing 1, 2, 3. Oh, I'll totally get a new cable. Hold up. Crackle, crackle. Tell you what. If it was, you just had gotten to get a new cable. I needed to know if it was crackling. Then I tested it and it is, so sorry. I'm going to keep on. Man, these things are coming in late. Thank you. Crack-a-lackin'. I like it. Here we go. On this reading, Stephen may well be claiming that while the nation's leaders indicted Jesus for prophesying the temple's doom and acting impudently against tradition, they themselves acted impudently against the prophets and did not properly observe God's commandments. Yeah, we need a crackle command. Crackle-lackin'. Little, clap. Doobie doo bop bop bop. Doobie doo bop bop. Good. At least it's gone for now. Okay, so let's continue. Verse 54. How much longer is this? Oh my gosh, it's actually longer than I thought it would be. 55, 56, 60, 82. Okay, let's keep it going. And when they heard this, they were cut to the quick, and they began gnashing their teeth at him. Stephen's audience reacts vehemently to being directly accused of Jesus' death, his words gaining the same response as that which the apostles received during their second trial before the Sanhedrin. Gnashing their teeth is a biblical metaphor signifying anger or frustration. Which is very interesting when we talk about heaven and hell theology, folks, because gnashing of teeth, anger and frustration and crying, weeping and gnashing of teeth, very interesting. Thank you. Takuya. So yeah, it's not necessarily this idea of torture. It's an idea of just frustration and missing out, I think. Anyway. Gnashing of teeth is a biblical metaphor for anger or frustration, which accompanies the vexation, literally being sawn asunder. Since this reaction contrasts with the crowd's contrition following Peter's speech at Shavuot, the impersonal, when they heard this, possibly signifies that the response came from the Sanhedrin rather from the general populace. Oh, no doubt. While the Sanhedrin was swayed by Gamaliel's argument, which added to their fear of following apostles might have gained, here the crowd's antipathy may well contribute to the violent outcome. Although Luke is uncharacteristically vague concerning the legal process which surrounded Stephen's trial and does not specifically state that Stephen was brought before the Sanhedrin, either in this verse or verse 57, the earlier mention of the Sanhedrin indicates that due legal processes were probably followed here. While the implication that the crowd took things into their own hands possibly suggests that they did so before the court arrived at its verdict, the public eruption may represent a legal prevention of any further blasphemy on Stephen's part. The fact that the actual stoning carried out by the witnesses outside the city limits as required by halakha, again people, halakha comes from the Losty, that's what I would say, missing out. Just missing out, right? Knowing what's coming, especially if we're talking about people resting in a resting place, because we all have to be resurrected, guys. Believers and non-believers will be resurrected and then judged, right? And then eternity or not. And a lot of that, I think that even in the resting place, while we wait, there might be this weeping and gnashing of teeth, knowing what's coming kind of idea. But anyway, that's a whole different thing. I think 3 Saturdays ago, Jake and I talked about it for 2 or 3 hours, so you can go to that and check it out if you want. Maybe. Okay. ED working. I'll find it again. There's a book called I Immortal, but it has I'm mortal. Immortal, I'm mortal. It's a fun little book, but it's all about heaven and hell theology. So I might read that at some point. So halakha is oral tradition of how to carry out certain commandments because they're not all clear in Scripture. We know that. You're always on point, Mordecus. Thank you. That's hilarious. These technical issues do not represent the quality of this train. Please bear with us. I guess I need my new... Okay, fine. Let's do it right now. No, it's okay. The intercom on the train is just so messed up. How long is this cord? Because really it matters how long these cords are. Six and a half feet. Yep. Okay, we're doing that. Bye now. Okay, whatever. Let's try it. I mean, I have a good mic and a good thing. It's just all about... That's cool. That's cool. Snowball mics work pretty well. Okay, that's it. We're just ordering this. We're going to see how it works. Okay, we'll see. Anyway, if the crackalacken comes back, be sure to have a crackle command ready to go. Because I swore I tested it and it's not doing it right now. So, okay. So, the fact that the stonings carried out by witnesses outside the city limits, as required by halakha, as required by the oral law tradition of how to do these things, implies that the court accepted the false testimony of the witnesses and execute Stephen according to Jewish law. The noun, enaresis, putting him to death, refers to any manner of violent death, including execution, murder, assassination, or in battle. The act of stoning otherwise frequently represents the instinctive, violent expression of popular wrath. It is in its early service as vindica publica, public vindication, may be reflected in the fact that the whole populace actively participates in the execution. Although it seems clear that the providential governor's imperium normally included the exclusive right to try capital cases, some evidence can be adduced to suggest that the possibility that the death sentence were passed by the authorities in Greek cities. While as a subject, rather than a free community within the Roman Empire, Judea possesses no authority, subject communities appear to have continued to exercise their own legislative, judicial, and administrative powers in large measure, even under Roman rule. As the highest national authority, the Sanhedrin retained a considerable measure of national influence. Consequently, when the Sanhedrin's authority to carry out sentence in capital cases seems to have been limited by the Roman government, it may still have possessed the right to execute in certain cases. If the Sanhedrin was permitted to execute offenders on the procurator's consent, Caiaphas, in power until 1936, in power till 36 BCE, may have utilized his good relations with Pilate to importune for the right to execute Stephen. So this is always a part of the possibility. I move stuff a lot. Yeah, and this is a table that's been on the edge of being stretched all the way because it's only 3 feet long, and it needs to go across my desk, so that might be part of it. Yeah, and the unplug, replug. Yeah, exactly. I got a braided one. Yep. And it's 6 feet, so it should work. We'll see. We'll do some test runs when I get it tomorrow. Alternatively, the event may have taken place either during a procuratorial vacancy, so the procurator might have been vacant, the office might not have been there, or during a period of Jewish autonomy. Pilate was apparently recalled in early 36 and his successor appointed by Caligula in the successor in 37. Josephus says that. Support for such a theory may perhaps be found in the fact that Josephus records that Ananus used just such an interim to execute James, Jesus' brother, on account of which he was relieved of his office. That's interesting, guys. It's that Josephus talks about it. Josephus records that Ananus, who was the high priest after Caiaphas, used just the exact same kind of interim between procurators to execute James, Jesus' brother. That's the historical account we have of the execution of James, by the way, is by Josephus, on account of which he was relieved of his office. So he did it, and they were like, you know what? Get out. You did it wrong. Caiaphas' own dismissal on the heels of Pilate's recall has similarly been associated with Pilate's ostensible authorization of Jewish action against Jesus' followers, given the account which indicates that Pilate sent Tiberius a report on the rise of the early community. The best historical circumstance for the Sanhedrin, independent of Roman permission to execute people in capital cases, lies during the period of Agrippa I's rule. That's 37 to 44-ish, i.e., when Judea was an independent Jewish kingdom. Some scholars propose in this regard that Stephen's execution took place during Agrippa's absence in Rome. while Gaius refrained from appointing a governor, suggesting that Agrippa's subsequent deposal of Simon Catharus in 41 in favor of Annas' son Jonathan, whom Agrippa felt to be more worthy of honor, although Jonathan declined the author, was based on Simon's legal presumption in executing Stephen. Okay. Whew. Buc-ee's. Oh, don't even talk about Buc-ee's. Oh, my gosh. Someone in Texas, exactly, Takuya. You know it. Someone's in Texas. Good old Buc-ee's. The wonderland of Buc-ee's. Although such a scenario may account for lack of reference to the Roman governor in Acts 6 through 8, it raises chronological and logical difficulties. Despite the cold storage of a Roman governor, Judea was not without Roman supervision between 39 and 41, since the events related in chapters 2 or 3 appear to have occurred consequently and without interval following Jesus' death, resurrection, and ascension. Little justification seems to exist for dating Stephen's trial as late as 39, not to mention 41. A date of 39 likewise puts the earliest possible date for the Apostolic Council at 52 and can only be achieved by suspending the relationship between Stephen's martyrdoms and Paul's conversion, a nexus which Paul's own witness confirms. In other words, like, these things are tied together scripturally. Never been to Buc-ee's. I just know it from, yep, good old Buc-ee's. I don't think there's a Buc-ee's in Florida. I don't know if they're outside of Texas. Maybe Louisiana? If anywhere, it'd be Louisiana. I don't think it'd be Oklahoma. While inconsistent with one another, it's a good stop, Mordecus. While inconsistent with one another, various early church traditions place Stephen's death 6 or 7 years following Jesus' crucifixion. Similar traditions, perhaps in a larger number of older and in part mutual independent sources, date Paul's calling to 18 months or 2 years following the crucifixion. That's weird. 18 months, 2 years. If the latter is ascribed to year 30, which for a variety of reasons seems feasible, Stephen's deaths would fall either in 36-37 or in 31-32, according to the above traditions respectively. Latter Pauline chronology, especially the date of the so-called Apostolic Council and Gallio's procureship in 51, would seem to demand the earlier dating. In light, and this is all technical biblical scholarship stuff. They just go over dating. They're like, let's just consider everything, guys. Well, let's consider everything. I get it. It's part of it. In light of such considerations, it would seem preferable to interpret Stephen's trial as conducted by the Sanhedrin, whom Pilate authorized to execute in the specific case, as the Sanhedrin might have approached him in the event that they decided to seek the apostles' execution. That makes sense. While killing is prohibited as one of the 10 Commandments, the death penalty is only prescribed for a willful murder, as distinguished from unpremeditated homicide or accidental killing. Premeditation is established by demonstrating either that a deadly instrument was used, or that the assailant harbored hatred or enmity towards the victim. Judicial murder is itself regarded as shedding the blood of the innocent, and hence as a capital homicide. Talmudic law introduces finer distinctions between premeditated and unpremeditated homicide, as well as subdividing the latter into neglected, accidental, or nearly avoidable acts, and those performed under duress, together with the inferences based on the presence of a deadly instrument and or previous expressions of enmity. Alabama and Georgia heard. Okay. And 2 in Florida. Okay. Well, cool. I didn't know if it was like Whataburger, where they're like, you know what? We're not going anywhere outside of Texas. Except now there's a little in Louisiana, and now there's actually some in Colorado Springs. I just realized if I get the job in Colorado Springs, guys, I'm excited about the job and everything, but they're going to have a Whataburger in Colorado Springs. Oh, they already do. Oh, okay, enough. Justifiable homicides includes murders which are permitted, such as killing a burglar at night, and those which are obligatory, such as participating in public executions. They also cover killing a man in self-defense or preventing another from killing or raping, as well as executing persistent heretics and apostates in public. Although failure to perform such obligatory killing is considered to be a sin, it is not a punishable action. That's what Like I said, I'm excited about the job. It's just it was a realization of the extra perk that I get. The two perks of getting a job in so far, besides the job itself, in Colorado Springs, well, there's 3 perks. Cheaper. What's up, Happy Bun? What's up, Hufflepuff's Joy? So we have, besides just the job itself, which is awesome, lower rent and or stuff. That's how I do it. I mean, I have the mentality to get there one day. Housing prices are cheaper. Whataburger's there. And Mickey Meesh lives in Colorado Springs. I can have a friend who streams in the same city as me. Though I'd be moving farther away from Dimma, Doom Guy, who's a little, not too far, but he's north of me. He's in the Denver area, but whatever. Either way, though. Food. Yes, food. What am I going to eat for lunch now? Now I want food. Okay, here's the thing, Mordecus. Whataburger is a hit or miss thing. You have to have it done right. It's not as forgiving as In-N-Out. They don't have the same procedures and consistent procedures as In-N-Out to get that consistent quality. But if you have a good Whataburger, it is amazing. It's a really good. Texas Burger is pretty good too, which is a local sort of chain to West Texas. And it is a little bit throughout Texas too, but Texas Burger is awesome. Okay. While killing in self-defense of another's life is sanctioned, the general view that the preservation of a man's life does not justify the killing of another. Capital sentence is nevertheless imposed only in cases where death is caused by the assailant's direct physical acts, thus excluding indirect measures by agency, subsequent to warning by 2 witnesses. Talmudic literature also discusses the legitimate mode, places, and employment of extra-legal measures. One of these is Hora'at Sha'ah, the use of extraordinary procedures in case of emergency, on which subsequent laws cannot be based. One example adduced of such procedure is Shimon Bish Shittak's sentence and execution of 80 witches in Ascalon on one day. Wow. Although some sources consider Shimon to be a zealot and his act to thus fit to serve the halakhic precedent. Excuse me. Among other measures, disciplinary floggings were resorted to in cases which the offender was not liable to punishment on formal grounds, the lack of previous warning or example. The Mishnah relates the ruling regarding zealots. If a man stole a sacred vessel or cursed by Koshem or made an Aramean woman his paramount, the zealot may fall on him. If a priest served at the altar in the state of uncleanness, his brethren, the priests, did not bring him up to the court, but the young men among the priests took him outside the temple court and spilt open his brains with clubs. Wow, they're getting very graphic. These zealots are identified as pious men who, zealous for the honor of the Torah, may punish a transgressor if they apprehend him in the act, like the biblical prototype of Phinehas. Okay? Such people are considered to be turners away of wrath. In other words, they're like getting it done so that God won't smite them. So they're trying to do it before God needs to do anything. Okay, interesting. Despite the sanctions extended to them, if such zealots do not actually witness the event, they are forbidden to subsequently charge the person before the court. Moreover, if they come to take counsel whether to punish the offender, the sages cannot instruct them to do so. If they do not punish the offender themselves, quote, if the zealot is a scholar, he shall have none awakening, i.e., teaching among the sages, and none responding among the disciples. If a priest, he shall have no son to offer an offering unto the Lord of hosts. Josephus records the story of how Honi, the circle maker, was lynched by a crowd who was incensed by his refusal to curse their enemies. Okay. 55, 56. We're making our way. Get her done. But being full of the Holy Spirit, he gazed intently into heaven and saw the glory of God, and Jesus standing on the right hand of God. And he said, behold, I see the heavens open up, the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. In the tradition of the prophets, Stephen is himself filled with God's Spirit, and the Sanhedrin gazed on his irradiated features. So Stephen gazed, and just as they gazed on his bright face earlier, this is a kind of poetic way of saying they gazed on this, but Stephen gazed into heaven, where he sees the glory of God. So they saw God's glory on his face, and he looks into the heavens to see God's glory. He resembles Micah in this respect, when the latter declares, quote, I am filled with the power, with the Spirit of the Lord, and with justice and courage to make known to Jacob his rebellious acts, even to Israel his sin. Micah 3:8. Stephen's vision through the Holy Spirit at the moment that he was to be sentenced is of God in his glory, with Jesus standing at his right hand. And, like Joseph, he suffers grave consequences on relating it to his audience. That is a good point. I've never thought about that. Joseph tells his brothers about his vision and heavenly glorious vision he's having in dreams. And they don't like it. And they're either jealous or mad or whatever it is. And they set out to, they don't necessarily, that's a thing in tradition. We don't know if the brothers just left him in the pit and then people came, or they meant, they literally sold them themselves. Who knows? But either way, it was not good. He may well have been mindful of Jesus' promise that everyone who confesses me before men, the Son of Man shall confess him also before the angels of God. Luke 12:8. Like Daniel in Daniel 7:13, Daniel's vision and Isaiah's vision in Isaiah 6:1, Stephen seems to be of God's throne in the temple. The only other mention of one like the Son of Man outside the Gospels occurs in the book of Revelation. Although Romans 2:16 may allude to the tradition. While Stephen's vision differs from Jesus' statement to the high priest, in that he sees Jesus standing rather than sitting at God's right hand, it is evidently based on the same tradition. The Son of Man was the judge of the world at the end of days and witness against the wicked generation for its apocalyptic fervor. According to Jesus, the blood of all the prophets shed since the foundation of the world will be charged against this generation. That's a big charge. Luke's tradition regarding Stephen may possibly serve as a witness for an early interpretation of the prophet like Moses, here Jesus, as an eschatological prophet, an idea which is linked to the motif of the martyrdom of the prophets. According to this tradition, just as the former prophets were killed, the eschatological prophets will also perish at the hands of the forces of wickedness. Both rabbinic exegesis and New Testament refer Zechariah 12:10, together with Isaiah 53, to the suffering endured by the Messiah. Rabbis were thinking about this stuff, guys. Another example, 57 and 58. But they cried out with a loud voice and covered their ears, and they rushed upon him with one impulse. And when they had driven him out of the city, outside the city, remember? That's how the halakha said you had to stone somebody. You had to go outside the city. When they had driven him outside the city, they began stoning him, and the witness laid aside their robes at the feet of a young man named Saul. Here we go. As Jesus' predictions regarding the temple's destruction and rebuilding, Stephen claims to see the vision of God on his throne in heaven may tip his listeners over the brink into violence. Despite... You okay over there? Here, you got your baby. There you go. Good girl. My dog is being too cute right now. Okay. Despite being the most respected prophet, Isaiah, Stephen's forebearer and prototype, as it were, is reported to have been brought to trial for having contradicted Moses' statement, "No man can see me and live," in declaring, "I saw the Lord sitting on the throne, lofty and exalted," in Isaiah 6:1. The sages resolved the discrepancy between the two texts by saying that all the prophets looked into the dim glass, but Moses looked through the clear glass. Okay. I.e., while the prophets imagined they had seen God, Moses knew from prophetic insight that he cannot be seen by mortal eyes. Luke's emphasizes the irony of the situation by describing the crowd's zealousness with the same word, with one impulse. He uses regarding the early community's unity. Stoning appearing to have been the standard form of biblical judicial execution during the biblical period. The Tanakh ascribes its use for 18 specific offenses, including incest and other forbidden sexual relations, blasphemy, idolatry, divination, sorcery, soothsayers, the enticer and beguiler, the one who profanes the Sabbath, and the rebellious son. Luke's notation that the crowd took Stephen out of the city reflects the halachot, the laws of stoning. The Mishnah gives precise detail concerning the mode of execution by stoning. This is interesting. Let's read this. When sentence of stoning has been passed, they take him forth to stone him. The place of stoning was outside, far away from the court, as it is written, bring forth him that hath cursed outside of the camp. Bring him outside the camp. That's where this is supposed to happen, even in Leviticus. One man stands at the door of the court with a towel in his hand, and another, mounted on a horse, far away from him, but near enough to see him. If, in the court, one says, I have somewhat to argue in favor of his acquittal, that man waves the towel, and the horse runs up, stops him. That was going forth to be stoned. A herald goes before him, calling, such a one and another such a one is going forth to be stoned, for that he committed such and such an offense. Such a one and such a one are witnesses against him. If any man know aught in favor of his acquittal, let him come and plead it. So they would give chances for people, from what the court was going to say and witnesses, and they try to do all this before they actually stone him. When he was 4 cubits from the place of stoning, they stripped off his clothes. The place of stoning was twice the height of the man. One of the witnesses knocked him down on his loins. If he straightway died, that sufficed. But if not, the second witness took the stone and dropped it on his heart. If that straightway died, that sufficed. If not, whoa! Memento mori. Why are we putting why are we putting Satanist ghosts and goats in my chat? How you doing, Memento? Welcome to the chat. Hail Satan. I don't know. I don't necessarily like the one law of Satanism, which is do what thou wilt. The Satan, the goat. Yeah, that is what it represents for sure. Who is it? In the Old Testament, they would actually send, on the Day of Atonement, they would do a sacrifice for the people, and they would take a goat and send him out into the wilderness to kind of take the sins out into the wilderness where the evil is. Out to Azazel. It's cool artwork. I mean, that's a heck of an artwork for just being dots on a page. But Memento, glad you're here. Much love to you either way. I mean, I don't know. Not mine. Yeah. Oh, it's not your work? Okay, heard. Oh, why does it say suspicious user? I don't think you're too suspicious, are you? But yeah, that's all interesting. But I can't ascribe to the one rule of Satanism, which is do what thou wilt is the whole of the law. I'm very suspicious. You think you're suspicious? Why? Why you sus, bruh? Why you sus, bruh? So yeah, we're just gonna. Right now. By the way, Memento, we're talking about stoning in the New Testament and what happened there. Something like that. Oh, you can? There's like a program for it? I'm reading them out. I know. I don't know why it's. I didn't press anything to make anything happen. All are welcome here. I just don't know. Do I think stoning is a good thing? I don't think that stoning is a good thing. Stephen was stoned. The prophets were stoned. The laws of stoning are very detailed, depending on the rabbi or who's talking about it. The rabbis would say if there was a killing in 100 years of a Jewish court, it would be called the court of bloodshed. That's what the rabbis said. So it was a very rare occurrence for there to be any kind of death penalty. Because anytime it says that this deserves death in the Torah, there's always a counterbalance, right? There's always a counterbalance of mercy and second chances, for sure. That doesn't mean the reality of death and the idea that sin leads to death isn't there. It's just like there were ways of witnesses and all these different things to help kind of root out the worst parts of our human nature, for sure. So we're already talking about Paul. So so this is in the middle of all this. The place of stoning was twice the height of the man. One of the witnesses knocked him down on his loins. If he was straightway died, that sufficed. If not, the second witness took the stone and stopped and dropped it on his heart. If he straightway died... Hold on. Stop. Stop. No bark. No bark. It's okay. Stop. Willow, it's okay. How's it going? Good. It's going great. Yeah. How many people? 7 or 8. Okay. I'm back. Yeah, she's doing... Oh, you want to do tricks for berries? Let's see if this even works right now. Hold on. Dang it, my phone cam isn't working. I don't know. How do I refund, Takuya? How do you refund? Because I can't do it right now. I can't do it right now. It's not working. I need to check that at the beginning of my stream now. Yeah, okay, please do, Takuya. Please do. Because I know you're saving up for your accents. What if there's no God to punish you for your sins, so there are no sins? What if? Okay. If there's no such thing as right and wrong, and there's no such thing as a judge who judges right and wrong, it's kind of a sad state of affairs that actually gets into the idea of kind of nihilistic views of the world where nothing matters and there's no such thing, and there's no such thing as good, there's no such thing as evil, and people can do whatever they want because it's just up to them what's good or wrong, good and bad, right or wrong. If there is no judge, if there is no right or wrong, Hitler and the worst people in the history of this planet that have just led some of the most atrocious things. First of all, if you don't believe good and evil, then you can't believe those things are bad necessarily. They were just bad in your eyes. Hitler was doing what he thought was right, therefore it was right. And then we also have the idea that he got away with it. Joseph Stalin, they just got away with it. Just do what you want in this life. Kill as many people as you want. And you won't have to won't have to own up to any of the things you did in this life. It's kind of a sad, it's not a freeing feeling to me. But there's also the idea of, proofs of there being something bigger out there, like Big Bang. I know people try to test nowadays. Some modern astrophysicists want to go, no, the Big Bang didn't happen. Well, they've been trying to explain it away for 50 years since they discovered it, 60 years since they discovered it. So, because right when they discovered that there was a focal beginning point to the universe, they're like, oh no, that means that there can be a God. We can't say that. Before that, they thought the universe was eternal. And now, it's like now we know that there's some origin to the universe, right? Neanderthals had completely different views of what was wrong and right. They murdered each other, true. No right or wrong. Who judged them? They couldn't read the Bible and know what's right or wrong. You're right. There's something about, and Paul talks about it in Romans. He talks about the idea that those who were apart from God's instructions and law, that there's something in us that is convicted to do right or wrong. That there is a natural lining up in who we are and how we're constructed as people to do that. We don't know enough about Neanderthals to really talk about that in that way, or to say that that they didn't have a complete view of what was right or wrong. We're discovering more every 10 years. We went from the dumb Neanderthal to a Neanderthal that's basically a modern day human now in what they used to do. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to keep reading this idea of what's happening with Stephen in chapter 7 of Acts. But yeah, I know what you're saying. And one thing at a time. I'm all about apologetics. I'm all about discussing these things. Well, it kind of guides us naturally. Well, I wouldn't even say it's necessarily that, Tagna, Brittany. That's part of the modern view of it. But before Jesus, before the covenant on Mount Sinai, back when Abraham was just a guy, and way before that, with the, in all Genesis, there's all these things about how mankind grew more violent and more, we all have free will. That's part of my whole argument, Memento, too, is that we have free will. It doesn't mean just because we can or do certain things or think certain things, it doesn't mean there isn't an objective idea of right or wrong. But I don't think that we can also say that there is no such thing as right or wrong, because then, again, it's okay for people to go murder their children if that's what they feel is right, because culturally, right and wrong is a cultural, subjective thing. It's a culture. It's a moral relativism, if you want to talk about that. Morals are relative to cultures and what you understand and do, so that there's no such thing as right or wrong. Okay, I have a hard time living with that if that's the reality. I have a really hard time dealing with that, because then, again, I'm going to be a nihilist and say nothing matters. I can do whatever I want in this world. I can hurt people and do however I want, as long as I just think it's okay. There's a positive outcome to it for me, so it is right. Okay. So back to my idea of like the worst people that have ever walked the earth are the people who've done the worst things. We're all bad people. There's no such thing as a person that isn't bad, that doesn't, because to be good, you have to be completely good. Otherwise, we're mixed. But to say that people can just get away with anything they want is depressing. It's depressing. But yeah, let's keep going. So the hand of the witness shall be the first. So it says, if he straightway dies and not suffice, he will be stoned by all of Israel, for it's written, the hand of the witness shall be first upon him to put to him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. Okay, now that's all conditional too. The location of the place of stoning is further specified as being outside the three encampments. That of the divine presence and of the priests, i.e. the temple court. That of the Levites, i.e. the temple mount, and that of Israel, the rest of the city. The reason being so that the court should not appear murderously inclined, that there might be a possibility of deliverance. The fact that the witnesses removed their outer garments also implies that they conducted the stoning, an interpretation potentially confirmed by Paul's later statement. I, was watching out for the cloaks of those who were slaying him. That's in Acts 22. And the crowds throwing off of their clothing when they are about to attack Paul himself in Acts 22. Luke introduces Paul here for the first time in a minor role, as he does with Barnabas and Stephen as well. Saul, which means asked or borrowed from God, is a common Hebrew name. Luke is the only person to give Paul's Hebrew name, using it up until the chapter 13, verse 9, when he switches to the Latin or Greek version of the name Paulos. In keeping with Paul's statement in his letters, Luke describes in Acts, Paul's Jewish identity lay at the center of his life. It is possible that Paul appears here in the official role, serving as the official appointed to wave the towel if new evidence was submitted. 26:10 suggests that he was a member of the Sanhedrin. A fact. Is that a Venom one? Dude, that's a tight one. Venom hype? I like that. I like that. Whose is that? Super Zombie's got a... I like that. Oh, yeah. It is possible that Paul appears here in his official role, serving as an official appointed to wave the towel if new evidence was submitted. 26:10 suggests that he was a member of the Sanhedrin, a fact which does not necessarily contradict the remark that he was a young man at the same time Stephen's execution, since the Greek term covers an age roughly between 24 and 40. Paul also appears to refer to his role in Stephen's death as representing some official capacity, although, again, he only speaks of watching out for the cloaks. The verbal affinity between these verses may suggest that Luke has heard a report of Stephen's trial from Paul himself. That makes sense from what we've talked about. Following this brief introduction, Luke devotes the majority of the second half of Acts to the description of Paul's travels and teachings. Brittany drew it? Cool. Tagna, good draw. I like it. I used to draw Venom all the time back in elementary school. Venom was my number one drawing. That and Spider-Man. Spider-Man and Venom. Back and forth. I mean, then again, I was a 90s kid who watched Spider-Man the Animated Series on Fox, like, religiously during the 90s. So I was totally, yeah. Okay, 59 and 60. Guys, we made it through Acts 7. And they went on stoning Stephen as he called upon the Lord and said, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. And falling on his knees, he cried out with a loud voice, Lord, do not hold these sins against them. And having said this, he fell asleep. Really, this is all that's left. Stephen continues to witness to Jesus' power and salvation up to the moment of his death. The fact that he fell on his knees would seem to confirm that he was stoned by all of Israel, right? Because once he falls and doesn't die, then he has to be killed by everybody. That's what the Talmud would say would need to be done. Carnage is cooler only because I like red. Maximum Carnage was my jam. Did you ever play the game? Anybody ever play the SNES game Maximum Carnage? Maximum Carnage? It was my favorite game. I've even played it on stream when I first started streaming into 2020 on a simulator or an emulator. I have to do that again because I love it. Would confirm that he was stoned by all of Israel. Stephen obviously understands that his death is imminent, and once again, invoking Jesus' precedent, utters almost exactly the same words as Jesus on the cross, according to Luke in his gospel. Quoting Psalm 31:5, Stephen extends a plea for forgiveness to those who are executing him, and his blood should not be held on their account as the prophets and Jesus before him. In direct contrast with Zechariah's plea, quote, may the Lord see and avenge, 2 Chronicles 24:22. Luke describes Stephen's violent death as falling asleep. Although the phrase probably derives from the laying out or lying of the corpse in a grave, as well as euphemism, it would appear to reflect the belief that God would raise people from the dead to inherit the world to come. Boom shakalaka. Boom! Bombaclat! I lost my place marker. Well, we'll get a real one. Okay. Guys, we got through Acts 7 today. Yay. Even though we're only that far into the first book. This is only chapter 1 through 15. And I have another book just as thick. Why, oh why, is this not working again? Okay, we're going to fix this. That's a statement of faith right there. We're going to fix this. Okay. Good. Listen here, good. Drugs are bad. Good. Dude, understand. Usually it's so quick. It just picks up on it, brah. No, okay. What's up, Soul Treasure? Thanks for coming in. Doris Rose dropping nude. What's up? What's up? Welcome. I'm trying to get my camera to work correctly. We shall see. No. Yes. No. Epoch cam? Do we have an epoch cam going? No. Okay. Yep. I'm feeling good, soul. I'm chilling. We just got done reading Acts 7. A little graphic. Stephen's martyrdom is pretty graphic. I might need to change this cord too. Guys, what's happening with my stream? Oh, fine. We'll continue to do this. We'll continue to do this lame camera. Okay. But it's also encouraging. Because, well, just like Jesus, when he was being stoned, he said, forgive these people. They don't know what they're doing. And this is the commentary we were reading. So that's what we've been on. I guess I'll change this up too then, since it doesn't want to cooperate with me. So yeah, Soul Treasure, tell us a little bit about yourself. The first time I've seen you in here. Is your name? Well, hello there, close up. Is your name Doris Rose? That's a cool name. Are you an artist, Doris? Do you do art? Because that's the first thing I saw when I looked it up. And it's an art about gaming. Tell me this is you. Somewhat? What do you mean, somewhat? What do you mean? Is this you? Is this your art? I mean, I just looked up Doris Rose. I don't know. Digital artwork. Sort of. If this is you, then the sort of is somewhat's a little modest here. Oh, no. Okay, I'm just making sure. Because this is Doris Rose art. Look at that. And it's a gamer. You can see why I thought that. It's a guy playing a Super NES. Because look at that detail. Anyway, I was just curious. I was like, Doris Rose. Oh. All right. Do you stream much, Doris? Oh, whoops. Nope, that's not the right one. We're not doing that. Okay. Oh, nice. Cool. I like it. Now, I'm going to check you out. Since 2019. Okay. So you weren't a COVID bandwagon kind of person, were you? All right, we'll go ahead and go this way a little. There we go. That's better. You weren't a COVID bandwagon person, it seems. Got in beforehand. Get out of my face. What are you doing? Oh, cool. We got plenty of people that did Mixer before. So we had Jate Live did Mixer before that I know. The biggest one that I know that did Mixer before was Dad Got Game. Dad Got Game. He's awesome. And thank you. I don't know why I'm amazing, but thank you. Nailed it. Nailed it. Okay, let's... Oh, awesome for hitting you up. Yeah, I'm going to check you out over here. Ooh, 716. If you guys don't know Soul Treasure, let's get her going up a little bit. Let's do a little bit of... She's been playing Farm. You played some Mario 64 recently? Tetris? Sonic? Pokemon? Soul Treasure, how come I haven't seen you in Aki's stream? If you suggest Aki, I'm in there all the time. There is, I believe. I don't know if it's... There you go. You got it. Not me! But you got to do shout out, yeah, Soul. That's hilarious. There you go. Yeah. Nice. Nice. I got raided by Aki last night on a late night Warzone random thing I did. So that was fun. Oh, we gotta get some of these in the chat. Oh my gosh, stop it. I know. I tried to set it up where it'll show a clip of their stream or something. Now... All right. Yeah, I think we're gonna. You don't want to step to this. I think we need to make our way over. Since we're done. Since we are done with the reading. Oh, thank you for the subscription, Soul. Thanks for using that Prime sub. Thank you for using that Prime sub. You only have one a month. That means 12 times a year, and I'm one of the 12. Yeah. Thank you. Yoshi's on. Yoshi OST? Or Alienator Yoshi? Or are they the same now? Yeah, he's live. Yoshi's live. Okay. Yeah, that's a bad one. Good call, Takuya. Yeah, the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. Okay. Let's start that raid. No problem, Tagna. Happy Bun. Thanks for coming in, Soul. Takuya, Mordecus. Our new Satanist friend who came in. You're loved and you can stay and hang out all you want, guys. Let's run these credits. Let's run these credits. Yeah, let's run these credits. Let's run these credits. Yeah. if it'll actually play my credits. There they are. Okay. Soul Treasure, thank you. Mordecus, thanks for the subscription, both of you. Revanche and Danaos and Losty cheered today. Man, today was a good stream. I like it. Good learning, participation. Let's go over to Yoshi.